Let's get started. Going live. And we're live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gravity Max live stream. I'm here at 4 p.m., 1 hour early, with Sebastian and our our guest today.
Hey, Jacob, you're getting a promotion.
You're getting a promotion.
Look at me.
Co-host.
I am the co-host now.
Exactly. How are you today, Jacob?
It's going good.
Nice. Yeah.
So before we started, my light blew out above me, which is why I am shrouded in darkness. So
a man of mystery.
I am a man of mystery. So this is how I will be. I hope it's all right. I hope you guys will be able to manage. But yeah.
Yeah. I think they'll be fine.
I think they will be fine. I'm gonna check our audio because again, I have loudened us to a significant degree.
Loudened. Yeah, that's great. All right. Oh, okay. I don't know why YouTube emailed me that we're live now. It usually doesn't do that.
Yeah, it just did that for me, like when I went live the other day.
Maybe that's an update. Maybe that's a new thing.
All right.
Anyway,
yeah, our audio sounds pretty good.
Now I know that I am live. Thank you, YouTube. All right. But anyway, so today we're talking about some fun things, and we'll get right to that. And I hope everyone's enjoying their weekend and Super Bowl Sunday. What teams are you guys rooting for? Because
I mean, it's Kansas City Chiefs versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Mm-hmm.
So Kansas City's in Missouri, right? It's not in Kansas.
That's the thing about Kansas.
So if you're asking me to choose between Missouri and Florida, I mean,
odd choice.
it is a very odd choice. It's like, would you rather be dumped inside a wood chipper or a snow blower? Like, neither really sounds that cool, but you know, the Chiefs have won more recently than the Buccaneers, so I guess that's following the analogy. I've already seen what it looks like when a body is dumped in a wood chipper, so I'm gonna go with the snow blower, and I'm gonna say I want the Buccaneers to win this one.
Nice.
This is officially a Kansas City Chiefs fan free zone. If you support the Kansas Chiefs, unsubscribe.
I'm about to say I'm near Tampa, so I support the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, although very tacitly, because until you said they were the Buccaneers, I was just going to say I guess I support the Tampa one.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
This is no longer...
How about you, Jacob?
Yeah, go ahead.
Even more tacitly, I'm supporting Tampa Bay because I was just like, yeah, it'd be cool to see Brady win again.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, let's get started, and hopefully we can finish before the Super Bowl, but I don't think any of us... I'm not going to watch it, so...
Do you really think our audience watches the Super Bowl, Max?
It's actually interesting.
That's a joke.
Yeah, I know, it's a joke. I don't, but a lot of math and science people are actually very interested in sports because of the analysis, and they like to do fantasy football and stuff like that.
That's true.
It requires analytical thinking. So it's actually an interestingly mixed bag.
Cool.
But yeah, anyway, let's get started with the plugs. So first, visit the Gravity Max website at gravitymaxmedia.com. There's stuff there. Go check it out. Also, follow Gravity Max on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and Patreon. All of the links are in the description below, and those will update you on things like the fact that we started an hour early today. So anyone that joins the stream in 55 minutes, you should have followed us on social media, because then you would know.
Yeah.
So next we have follow Sebastian on social media at 128 seconds on Instagram, and then 128 seconds on YouTube. On YouTube, he makes 2-minute long short educational videos that sort of talk about similar topics that we talk about on the live stream, but in a more concise format. Links in the description. Yep. And then also Jacob you run a channel called Daikaiju Productions, and
Yeah.
I got to go get that. Put that link in the description. I've got to do that.
Very nice animations, very top tier. I love them.
Yep.
I've been a big fan of this channel for quite a while.
Yeah, I love that channel. Yeah, you're on our featured page too, so go check out the featured page of our channel, because then you can get to that channel. But also, I'm about to put the link in the description anyway, so you'll get there quickly. Let's put it in here. Okay, Daikaiju Productions. All right, and so yeah, that's that. So go check out our wonderful, like, what do I say? Sister channels, I guess. But yeah, go check out all those channels. Very good videos. So yeah, next, A Bottle Dipped Flame. Link in the description. It's my sci-fi book. It's the sequel to the first one.
It has already been named the New York Times bestseller.
Oh yeah. Well, I am just receiving this news. Wow.
Yeah. To be honest, it's not that high of a bar. Everything is the New York Times bestseller.
Yeah. No, maybe I can get on the Westport Now bestseller list. What do you think?
Yeah, thanks for doxing us. Anyways.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Maybe I can get on the Herald Tribune bestseller list, too.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think they all know. I'm pretty
sure
they
know. And, like, you know, you could probably...
Half the people know us, so...
Yeah.
Anyway.
They could Google it for you. They can't. I don't think they can Google it for me.
Wait, how can they Google it for me?
If I Google it for you, I think because of the article that was written, someone could piece it together.
Okay, yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's like.
Oh, and I'm in that article too. Damn.
Ha ha ha.
Yeah, I've been got.
In that article as
See,
well.
you were smart enough. You were smart enough to move.
To move to just leave. Yeah. No, it's whatever. Yeah. I now live where Stephen King lives, which is pretty cool. Anyway, so episode Half Past Moon. We're talking about time in space. How do we measure time in space? How is it going to be done? Because those will be important questions to ask as people start living in space, because they're going to need to figure out how to measure time. Here on Earth, we measure time based on just, one day syncing up to the cycle of the sun rising and setting, and 1 year syncing up to the cycle of the seasons, which makes sense and has a real functional purpose. But when it comes to space and different astronomical bodies in space, it begins to get a little blurry, and there are questions about the different things that matter, because some of the planets that are, say, very far away from the sun might not care how long a day is, because the sun is just some faint little object in the sky, and it's like, oh, I don't care when it's up or down, doesn't cross my mind. Other places have such a slow rate of rotation that the sun will be up for months on end, and they can't just stay awake for months at a time. They would need too much coffee for that. That is the only reason there's not enough coffee in the budget. But they can't do that, so what are they going to do? And then some planets, like Neptune, has an orbit that is over 100 years long, so that's not really a very practical year length. Things like that are questions that we will have to ask as we go into space. And then the one additional complexity is that the second is now an SI unit, defined by 9 million turns of a cesium atom or something. And so
cesium-133,
that has a specific,
I think.
Yeah, cesium-133. And so that has a specific definition within the scientific community, and any science experiments that are conducted will have to use the second. So then the question is, how do we keep that unit in play where, because the problem is, the second began as a unit defined based on the day length on Earth, but then it became an SI unit. And as we go out into space, we are going to encounter planets that are not Earth, and the second will have no bearing there, but people might want to keep it around. So those questions will have to be answered in the future. Right now, it's just the ISS. And so what the ISS does, the 7 people on the ISS, It's not that big a deal. They just follow Universal Standard Time, I believe. I'm not sure what time zone, actually. I'm going to look that up, actually, because that's an interesting question. Time zone on the ISS. Because you would think they might want to follow, like, Houston or something. Just whoever they talk to the most might be easier. But, okay, so they use Universal Standard Time, or Greenwich Mean Time, which is 1 hour behind Central European Time. I don't know why they felt the need to mention that in this article, because more people know about Universal Standard Time and Greenwich Mean Time than Central European Time.
For all of our Central European viewers, this one's for you.
Yeah, this one's for you. So
Stanislav so be like, yeah.
Stanislavas from the jungle. That's what came to my mind. So yeah. Oh, this is interesting. Oh, okay. And new members arrive acclimated to Kazakhstan time, because that's where they launched the Soyuz.
Yeah, Chris Hadfield talks about that a lot.
What does he say?
In Kazakhstan, about him launching a couple of times from there. And him, I think he just stayed there for a bit because he had to learn Russian anyways, because he was working with Soyuz so closely. And he was just talking about being in Kazakhstan. But
But yeah, so that's interesting. So that, because it is the International Space Station. And so that makes it more difficult for crews in America to sort of coordinate with people on the space station, because they are always going to be, 4 to 8 hours behind, depending on where in the country they are.
Yeah.
But then it's got to be really hard for Japan, because I think there's one astronaut right now, Soichi Noguchi. He might have come back down since the last time I checked. I'll actually check again, but Japan is probably on the exact opposite time zone. So, so that's just interesting, and it's probably really interesting how they coordinate things with the International Space Station, just complexity. But already you can see we only have 7 people in space, and it is already this complicated that we have to think about different countries and all that sort of thing. And then Russia is a few hours ahead, so all the people from Russia. Oh yeah, so Soichi Noguchi is still on the International Space Station. So yeah, same crew as the last time I checked. But yeah, so how do they coordinate things? That's just kind of just an interesting question, and it'll get more interesting as more people live in space.
We also have some chat if you want to read that out as we move into the next slide.
Oh yes, okay. So Barry Rudin says, "Hi guys, I'm watching now. I just posted that you're live on my Facebook. Cool. Hopefully we get some people from Barry Rudin's Facebook." Then Jam McCarthy, 1975, says, "Seb,
Jam.
Your screen went black. Oh, never mind. Oh, never mind. Never mind. Jacob, what's up? All right, cool. So,
hi, Jam.
Yeah, Jam's here.
Jam is here. We need to get Jam on one of these at some point.
Yeah, exactly. So let's get started with clocks. So the first thing we're going to talk about is clocks, which we were sort of talking about before with Universal Standard Time and the time zones on the International Space Station. And so this is about the unit of time that people live their days by. How often do they sleep is the essential question here. How often do they go to work? That is what we're focusing on, the length of one day. And when we get to calendars, we will be talking about how do they live many days? How do they count their days? How does that work? So that's the question we're going to answer here.
Max, do you own a watch?
I do not own a watch, and there's an interesting reason is that for some reason every watch I have breaks very quickly in a few months. And that may be because despite the fact that I am a righty, for some reason I also like to wear stuff on my right hand. So like maybe that messes up the watch. Like maybe that's what was going on. Like maybe because people always wear it on their left hand, and I think that's because my mother is a lefty, so she wears stuff on her right hand because this non-dominant hand. But anyway.
Jacob, do you own any watches?
A long time ago. Not currently. I had a watch that was rated as water resistant once, but I put it in the sink and turned on the tap water to see how far that would go, and it didn't work out in my favor.
Oh boy.
Yeah, no.
Cut me a break. I was like 10 at the time.
Yeah, I was going to some social event, and it was like a while ago, like a couple of years ago, and I don't have a watch. I'm thinking about buying a watch. That's another thing I'm thinking about getting, other than a crossbow, which was what we were discussing before we went live.
Crossbow and a watch.
A crossbow and a watch, so I can...
often bought together.
Yeah. I was like, I get all dressed up because it was like a formal event. I put on my suit, my tie, as long as I got my suit and tie, and then like my whole outfit, and then I'm like, oh wait, I should have a watch, and so I run up to my dad. I'm like, Dad, I need a watch. And he's like, all right, here you go. And it was just this completely broken watch, and he's like, here you go. This is completely busted. Have fun. So I'm like, cool. So I put it on, and it looked pretty nice. It matched my belt and all the necessities. And I get to this place, and I'm having fun, and then someone comes up to me, and it's like, hey, what time is it? Some like adult comes up to me, sees I'm wearing a watch. He's like, yo, what time is it? And I look at it, and I totally forgot it was broken, and so I was like, oh yeah, it's like 1:58. And he's like, oh, thanks. And then he like, I watch him, and he's like 1:58, and he like hurries out the door. And I'm like, wow, it looks like that guy was in a rush. And then 2 hours later, I check my watch again, and it's still 1:58, and I'm like, oh my god.
Oh my god, that's hilarious. Yeah, I feel like the smartphone has essentially eliminated the need for watches.
Yeah.
Seb.
Yeah.
So your talk of needing a crossbow and a watch reminded me of a 16th century Czech startup which produced an item that was a meat cleaver, a pistol, and a calendar of saints.
Whoa.
Meat cleaver,
I need
a pistol, and a calendar of saints.
You could create this spiritual successor. There's a market here.
There is a market. Just combine things that you wouldn't think about.
Yeah,
I bet Elon Musk would sell one.
Yep.
Honestly.
Yeah. Anyway, so let's start with the planet Venus. So Venus has a day length of 116 days and 18 hours, which is quite long, and that is the solar day length rather than the sidereal day length. The often quoted day length on Venus is 243 days. But that is not the frequency at which the sun goes up and down on Venus. That is the frequency at which a star out in space reaches the same spot. That's why you'll hear people say, like, oh, a day on Earth is really 23 hours and 56 minutes long. You see, it usually isn't as significant. It's not that significant for the Earth. It's 4 minutes. But the difference between the sidereal day and the solar day gets very exaggerated when you have day lengths as long as Venus. But that being said, is that this day length is so incredibly long. And so if you were to try to live by that, there is no way that could happen, because you would have to, you get, 58 days straight of sunlight and then 58 days straight of darkness. So unless you want to hibernate like a bear, I think we all want to hibernate like a bear.
There's a market there, yeah.
There's a market there for hibernating like a bear. But then you would also have to be awake for 58 days, which would be much less pleasant.
I could do it.
You think you could do it?
I could do it.
The current record holder is 11 days.
11 days.
Although that record is from 1960, and we don't... I bet someone could have beaten the record since then, but what happened is that shortly after that record from 1960, all the major record counting people were like, this is pretty unhealthy and someone's probably going to get killed if they try this, so let's not count it anymore. So no one has tried.
I bet someone has broken that.
I think. Yeah, I was about to say that past the 11-hour mark, it's possible, but then you cease to be human. There was an experiment that tried this. It was called the Russian sleep experiment.
Oh.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with this.
I am familiar with the
Wait,
Russian
is this a real
sleep
thing?
experiment.
Because I've heard of the Russian sleep experiment from very clickbaity YouTube channels.
Yeah, it was like a creepypasta.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Yeah.
That right there is peak 2010 internet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What is it, like info? Actually, I don't want to say their name. I don't want to, because they might get mad at us. But
yeah, we have some more.
One of those shows.
We have some more chat.
Oh, some more chat.
Yeah.
All right. So the chat says, colon closed bracket, and that's from Jam McCarthy. And then he says, y'all never join Discord anymore.
Boy,
colon,
if you make
open
the
bracket.
Earth server interesting, and I'm getting on tomorrow, so you can cool your jets.
And then Barry Rutan says, is that Jacob? Yay, nice to see you too, Jacob. So yeah.
Jacob is our most loved guest. He's really the fan favorite.
Most accolade. Yep. But yeah, so back to Venus, right? With that immensely long day length, it is likely that people will have to chop it up. And the most natural way to do that would be to just divide that into 24-hour segments and just, live like you normally would on Earth and have 24 hours in a day, 60 minutes in an hour, and then 60 seconds in a minute, and just essentially follow Earth time. And there's a few reasons for this. So other planets, or not planets, but moons, as we get farther out, will have day lengths that are, say, twice as long as a day on Earth. And so it makes sense to be very precise there and cut it in two. But on Venus, with a day length that is 116 days longer, it just sort of feels like unnecessary to follow the day length with an exact integer. And also, Venus is a planet where at first early colonization will be in blimps and floating airships. So you can just float around the planet. And it's likely that, well, in my books, actually, the blimps on Venus follow the sun. And so they stay just in front of or behind the terminator, which is the sunset, essentially, the sunrise or sunset. And they, follow a 24-hour long day. And they're able to sort of have day and night in a perpetual twilight kind of thing. And it's interesting. People could do that in the future because Venus rotates so slowly that you could outrun the sunset at a pace of 4 miles an hour. You could literally, and that's at the equator. So if you are farther north, that is a much slower speed. Imagine just taking a leisurely stroll and outpacing the sunset. That is what you could do in the higher latitudes of Venus. But yeah, so again, 24 hours, 60 minutes, 60 seconds. People on Venus would probably live by the same clock as they did on Earth.
Yeah.
Sort of like with the ISS and how the ISS is on Universal Standard Time. People will probably just take the Universal Standard Time to Venus and follow it. So yeah, that is
I'm just imagining you have if you think of time zones on Venus, right? This guy, he's just outrunning time. He's I'm Barely Allen. I'm the fastest man alive, and runs back in time.
Runs back
in time in air quotes.
Yeah, you could very much do that.
Yeah.
Go back in time. Yeah, it's interesting. There's this scene in this book. It's the book called Blue Mars. It's the third in the Kim Stanley Robinson Mars trilogy. And there's this scene where these Martian sort of politicians are on Mercury, trying to, make deals and stuff. And they go outside on Mercury. And so Mercury has a similarly slow day, rotation rate and a long day length. And so they have this city on Mercury, that moves away from the sunrise at the appropriate rate. And so these people, like they do in EVA, you know, they go out and they like look around, and they have to make sure that they're following the city at 3 miles an hour, or else they'll get left behind. But then one of them like breaks their ankle or something like that, and then there's this intense scene where and Mercury has similar like gravity as Mars, where the person just lifts up the other person and is trying to go as fast as possible, but they're feeling like the sun gain on them, and like they're like, oh no, like it's gonna burn me. And it's just interesting. They survive. They get back to
spoilers, Jesus.
It's a minor scene, but
I was on the edge of my seat.
Oh my gosh, you were on the edge of your seat. Yeah, that's like, listen, that is after the first 600-page book, the second 600-page book, and then it's like 400 pages into the third book. So that would be quite a lot of waiting.
Well, I was on page 1599, so thanks for ruining the series.
I apologize. I apologize profusely. Anyway.
Yeah, that's Venus.
That is Venus.
That is how clocks would look on Venus. Venus is going to be such a chill place, dude. Jazz capital of the solar system. I'm calling
Jazz
it right
capital.
now. That's where I'm retiring. Venus. I gotta be the one to introduce Venusian jazz. That's me, baby. Just
jazz.
the pioneer, founder, creator, and CEO of Venusian jazz.
I like it.
It's what keeps me going.
Yeah, Venusian jazz. But anyway, now let's go to Luna. So I would say that Luna is in a pretty similar situation to Venus, and that is that it has a day length that is 29 and a half days long, which is just unnecessarily lengthy. So people would probably just, again, follow UTC, Universal Standard Time, or whatever time zone. Say, if they're like, if it's an American expedition, then maybe they would follow like Eastern Time or something. And like a Chinese expedition would probably follow Beijing time, like the entire country of China does, which is just interesting. Probably not fun for people in the west of China, but I don't think China cares much for the people in the west of China. But
and just like that, the channel's been blocked in China.
Gone. Yes, yeah. But it's just very fascinating. Like, China is as large as the U.S. However, they have the entire country on Beijing time, which would be like having all of the United States on Eastern Standard Time, New York City time, which would be very not fun for the people in California and Oregon and Washington. And then slightly less not fun
if you
for
cross
people in Nevada, but yeah.
Yeah, if you cross China's westernmost border into the next neighboring country, it's like a 5-hour time difference.
Yep. Yeah, that is the greatest time difference that you can make in a single step from China to Afghanistan, I believe.
Me crossing the border from China to Afghanistan.
Time traveler. But yeah, so Luna will likely just take on the same time zone as Earth. Yeah. And yeah, just similar reasons. I think the moon, Luna, it rotates fast enough that I'm not sure you can actually outrun the sunset, but maybe you can try. So, and at the higher latitudes, of course, you can outrun the sunset if you're about a mile away from Earth's North Pole, probably. But yeah, I think that about sums it up. There's just not much. And also, Luna is so close to Earth and so closely related that it'll probably be like just very convenient. Also, Venus is very close to Earth in terms of like, Venus is actually the closest planet to Earth, not Mars. And so, like, spoilers. In terms of travel times and stuff. Jesus. Spoilers. Yeah, but, oh, sorry, were you only Were you only 8.5 billion years into your reading of the universe?
Yes, I had just hit the. I just got to like Galileo, and you spoiled it.
Oh snap!
Next thing you'll tell me is that the Earth actually goes around the sun. Haha! Wouldn't that be a thought?
Yeah, that would be such an interesting plot twist. But anyway, so that's Luna. Not much more about that. So now Mars.
Moon's gonna be cool.
Yeah. So Mars has a day length of 1 day and 37 minutes, which is quite inconvenient, but also very convenient. It's actually very convenient because it could have been literally anything. So it's actually pretty lucky, I would say. I retract.
It's very convenient if you just want to speed, or if you want to binge watch all of my content. I think, excluding streams, I think I'm at like, about, I don't even know. Actually, I'm probably above 37 minutes. I'm probably like an hour.
Yeah, I think you're past 37 minutes, but yeah, it's inconvenient in terms of trying to keep it in precise coordination with Earth, but it's actually very convenient for the people there because the people on Luna and Venus will have to have some sort of artificial lighting system. They'll have to have lights that turn on during the night, and they will have to have shades that block out the sun during the day, just because that would be very irritating. Midnight sun. But on Mars, the day length is a little bit longer than a day on Earth. So there are a few ways that we could deal with this. And one way is you could just take a regular clock from Earth and just tinker with its electronics a little bit so that it just ticks at a slower rate. And that rate is precisely 2% slower. So if you have a clock that each second is 2% longer than a normal second, and then you have 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, and 24 hours in a day, then your clock will stay synced with the rising and setting of the sun on Mars. So what do you think about that? That is option 1.
Let's hear option 2, then we will weigh the options.
Yeah, so option 2, and this is like this, I would say there's option 2A and 2B. So option 2A is that you have 24 hours, 60 minutes, and 60 seconds, but then at the end of the day, you just add another 37 minutes and 39 seconds just every single day. That's option 2A. And then option 2B...
goes into overtime?
Yeah, you go into overtime, exactly. Option 2B would be something more like you have, 24 hours, but then you have an entire 25th hour, but you only have that some days. So then it's much more like a leap hour. So it would be about 2/3 of the time you would have that 25th hour, and then 1/3 of the time you just wouldn't and would have a normal 24-hour day. That keeps the numbers a bit cleaner rather than having 37 minutes and 39 seconds. But of course, everything comes with its pros and cons. So what do you think? Option 1, option 2A, or 2B? Like, which sounds the most preferable to you?
I do like the overtime concept, because I feel like some people would take it to be like some kind of purge. They're like, we are now outside the realms of standard time, and then all of the worst events occur then, and to introduce
the witching hour.
The new witching hour. I do think that the option 1 is probably the most likely. But I'll cast my vote for 2A. Jacob, what are you thinking?
I think that leap years, but with multiple leap days, or maybe it's like leap months, is probably more likely.
2B, you mean, like the leap hours thing, or?
Yeah, although I think that because if you let it build up to the point where it could be a full leap day, then that would just mess with everyone's like internal clocks.
Yeah, definitely. You couldn't really do that because then it would be like it would make a complete circle essentially of like of the sun. So if you were to do that, it would get to the point you would have the sun rise at every time. It would be 37 minutes later approximately each day, which would kind of make a complete loop. So yeah, I don't think that's a viable option, but
yeah, Max.
I think it'd be interesting if you're adding hours to the day, though.
mm-hmm.
And then eventually, what's the considered if you stick to a 365 day year for like counting purposes and a 687-day year for like harvests or the equivalent on Mars, like how we have like lunar month charts for the tides, and then we have our 365-day year months as well. Eventually, those would all get out of sync, the Earth 365 and the Mars 365, because the days on Mars would have that 25th hour sometimes. So I think it'd be interesting to see how they rectify that.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. And once we get to the like calendar section, we can talk about that more. But I imagine Mars probably wouldn't, like, I think they would follow their own calendar for the most part, rather than an Earth calendar. But yeah, that's definitely interesting. They'll have to think about the Earth calendar at least. Well, and it really depends on the person. So this is what I would say. I would say, well, in terms of what's most likely, I don't know. But in terms of what if I were a Martian citizen, would prefer, I would prefer option 1, just because it is the most convenient. You don't really have to think about it that much. It's nice, it's neat. It very inconspicuously, brushes the extra time under the rug. You know what I mean? And it allows, although they are very much on the way out, it allows analog clocks to work as well as digital clocks do, which is just nice. And I think that scientists could have their own special clocks whenever they undergo a science experiment, or they could have a simple conversion whenever they do that. And so basically, that ties back into what I was saying earlier about the SI unit of the second. And so the main disadvantage of option 1 is that the Mars second is no longer an SI unit. It is like 2.37% longer than the SI unit, which is inconvenient and messy, and like it's just a mess, right? And it would be interesting to deal with. Whereas the other one makes the counting of the day a bit more messy, but it keeps the SI unit. But here's what I posit. How often does the second really come up in your day-to-day life as an SI unit? Like how much does it really matter to you that a second is precisely 1 second and not 2% longer?
Well, let me introduce you to a little-known YouTube channel.
Oh yeah.
Named 128 seconds.
Yeah. Does it affect you a lot?
It does. I have to count every second.
That's fair. You would have more time for your videos. You would have exactly 2.5 extra seconds.
Ooh, I could get a lot done.
I think what you would see.
Yeah.
If you did the option 1 though, I think what you would see is like people on Mars would generally use Martian seconds, but then in the same way that like American scientists use meters when conducting their experiments instead of feet and inches, I think that's what you would see is you'd have Martian seconds for daily use, and then a handful of select people would be using SI seconds.
Yeah, that's what I imagine too. It's interesting. And the reason that I would say that's justified is because that's actually useful. Whereas in America, there's really no using feet, and that isn't providing an actual like tangible benefit to people over meters. Whereas using Martian seconds, I would say, would be a real benefit for people in their day-to-day lives. I don't know. But it's just sort of interesting. It's sort of about how colonization on Mars it ends up being carried out. Because in my book, in the book that I mentioned earlier, not my book, Kim Stanley Robinson's book, Red Mars, they take option 2A. So they call it the time slip. At midnight each day, the clocks just stop for 37 minutes and 39 seconds. And it's interesting because I do like that sort of thing, as it's like a bonus time, because if you ever feel like the day is too short, you know what I mean? Like sometimes it feels like the day is too short, and so it's like you could use those 37 minutes and 39 seconds for exactly like getting all the like excess tasks you need to get done. Like you ever know, like you have those tasks that they only really take 5 minutes, but you just never get around to them because and you do things that take hours and hours, but you just never get around to those little 5-minute things. I feel like the 37-minute 39-second window would be a great time to just be like, okay, I've got like my little things I need to do. But I digress. It's an interesting thing. And so the reason they have the time slip in the Kim Stanley Robinson Mars series is that the first Martian mission is much more akin to like the International Space Station. It is conducted by an international team, sent by like world governments. But if it's more like a private space flight thing, because we've got SpaceX now that is trying to go to Mars, and so if SpaceX gets the first people to Mars and the first base established on Mars, then it would be less about sort of mission-oriented like things like that, and they might be more just about living there. And I feel like that sort of attitude would be more agreeable with the slowed down Martian seconds.
Yeah,
it's just a really interesting conundrum. That's why I was saying earlier. It's sort of inconvenient, but it's like it's just fascinating because I feel like unless you are doing business with Earth or you are doing conducting science experiments, it would probably just be option 1 would be the best.
Cap. Anyways, let's move on.
But yeah. Anyway, let's move on. So that's that debate. You can answer in the comments below which you would prefer. But yeah, so now we go to the Jovian System, which is a bit more complicated.
Oh boy.
But
Who's Jove?
It's fascinating. Who is Jove, and why does he own a system? So the Jovian System consists of Jupiter, Chicago, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto. See last episode to understand that joke. The actual moon is called Io. But people probably wouldn't live on Jupiter proper because the gravity there is crushing. So no one will really live there for the most part. So that's sort of out of consideration. So the other 4 Galilean moons are just very fascinating because the first 3 of them, Io, Europa, and Ganymede, are locked in a mean motion resonance. So every time Io goes around Jupiter 4 times, Europa goes around Jupiter 2 times, and Ganymede goes around Jupiter once. And then Callisto is unfortunately the odd man out. Callisto does not get to be in any resonances. And so, because these 3 moons are in this tight resonance, and also because they are all tidally locked to Jupiter, since they are tidally locked to Jupiter, it means that the length of one orbit is also the length of one day. And the result of that is that approximately 1 day on Ganymede is equivalent to 2 days on Europa, which is equivalent to 4 days on Io. Except there is some difference, there is some shift, and that is actually due to the sidereal day versus the solar day. And it's very sad. It's a tragedy, because it makes things ever so slightly off, but you can add leap seconds and stuff, so you don't have to worry about that. But it's just basically the fact that relative to just space, Io, Europa, and Ganymede are in a mean motion resonance. But every time Jupiter goes around the sun once, it means that the actual number of solar days is the true number plus 1. The number of orbits plus 1, which is just very strange to think about, the time, the number of days, but it's basically like this. Imagine, for instance, these aren't the real numbers, but say that Io has 100 sidereal days in one Jovian orbit. Io has 200 and Ganymede has 400 because they are in a mean motion resonance. But in terms of solar days rather than sidereal days, the numbers would be 101, 201, and 401, which, 201 is not exactly twice as much as 101. You would need 202. And then 401 is not 4 times. So because of the fact that solar days are different than sidereal days, you get this slight shift, which means that each moon will have a day length that's like 7 minutes off from its neighbor. But, it is what it is, right?
It is what it is.
Yeah, so there are a ton of different things that you could do here, but what me and Sebastian sort of worked out was that possibly the best system is one where you have 24 hours in a day, 60. Oh, wait, sorry. I should give you some context first. The day on Io is roughly twice as long as 21 hours and 20 minutes. So dividing it in 2 is the most tolerable day length, and then Europa you would divide that in 4, and then Ganymede, you divide that in 8. Callisto, you would divide that by 19. So they're all around 21 hours and 20 minutes long, which is a bit shorter than a normal day on Earth, but it is worth it, again, because if you were to just say, let's throw out the day lengths here and go with just 24 hours, just a standard Earth day, then the days on Io will slowly get out of sync, and actually pretty quickly get out of sync, and it would just be very much confusing. So 21 hours and 20 minutes keeps things roughly related to the actual rising and setting of the sun. But anyway, so we thought that it would be the best thing to do to divide the day into 24 hours, 60 minutes, and then 53 to 54 seconds, which is sort of confusing. And you might be like, why would you do that? That's so horrible. That's stupid. But there are some merits to it. So let's go, if we think about option 2A on Mars, if we were to try to apply that here, that would mean that the clocks would start at 0 and then count up to 21 hours and 20 minutes and then reset to 0, which is weird. So instead of getting your nice bonus 37 minutes, you're just subtracting, 2.5 hours, which would be sort of jarring. Because imagine 9 p.m., it's 9 p.m., you're like, okay, I'm going to go to bed soon, I'm going to go to bed early, to have a nice fresh start on the day. And then half an hour later, it's midnight, and you're like, oh shoot, I have, stayed up very late. It would be too jarring. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. On Mars, you can get away with it because it's just 37 minutes, it's just half an hour. It doesn't really throw things off too much. But on Io and these Galilean moons, it would really mess with time. It would really mess with people's conceptions of time. Noon couldn't really be thought of as noon. That's the basic problem, is that on Mars, having a bonus 37 minutes at the end of the day, you can still think of time as roughly the same you think of it on Earth. You can think of 6 a.m. as sunrise-ish, noon as midday, and 6 p.m. as sunset-ish. But if you had this sort of cut system where it stops at 21 hours and 20 minutes, then sunrise would be, a bit before 6 a.m. Noon would be more at 10:30 or 10:45, which is just weird, it just messes with their sense of time. So option 2A, I would say, is not a viable solution. So then the other possibility is you could do option 1, which is the Martian second. So you could have an Ionian second and have 24 hours, 60 minutes, and 60 seconds. And the seconds are 89% as long as the seconds on Earth are. But I feel like that is too significant for the usefulness. I don't know. I feel like that throws things off too much. Like, people could handle a 2% increase, but although I will say this is the most promising alternative in my opinion, I think having a second that short would just mess with things. And here's the reason why, is that if you're going to like measure speeds and put up like signs, you know, speed limits, and you're going to say, well, actually, having different hours does also mess with this, because people usually measure things in miles an hour or kilometers an hour. I wasn't thinking about that because I always think in meters per second, but because I don't drive enough. That's really the reason why.
Wow.
Doing too much physics.
Imagine.
So I always think of things as meters per second. But again, people could use meter per second speed limits here, and it would still sort of make sense. But I don't know. So here's the ultimate conclusion. The ultimate conclusion is that the difference between minutes and seconds, like that little gap there, I would say is like the least significant sort of thing. So if you have this system where at 53 seconds the minute starts over, people aren't going to be too bothered by that compared to how bothered they would be if the day restarts at like 9:20 p.m. Like, that is just horrible. And so having that 53, and also when it comes to talking about time, you never really say like, oh, I'll see you in precisely 300 seconds. You usually say, oh, I'll see you in 5 minutes, I'll see you in 15 minutes. And so the second doesn't really come into play as much. And so this keeps the SI unit in day-to-day use as well as for science. I don't know. It's just sort of what we thought of. But you could very well do something more akin to the Martian option 1. But I don't know. What do you guys think? What's a good solution for the Galilean system?
So, Chicago must be obliterated. Other than that, anyways, I feel like, I don't know. I do like, if we're going between these two options that we have up, I would say,
or you can come up with.
I'm
another
not creative,
one.
Max.
But, okay.
I feel like I do like the 0.5, 0.25, 0.125 because it's reminiscent of the I'm forgetting the word, the resonance of the moons. I like that, so I would go with the first one up here.
Okay. Oh yeah. Sorry, actually, these aren't two different options. This is more two different worlds. So this covers. The first one talks about Io, Europa, and Ganymede. I should have clarified this. And the second one talks about Callisto.
Yeah. Well, Callisto must also be obliterated. Yeah. So.
Callisto is a strange one, and again, it's not in the motion resonance. Ideally, you would slice the Callistan day into 16 equal segments, and it would roughly follow all the other days, but it doesn't. But the closest approximation of the other days would be if you slice the Callistan day into 19 segments. And all that changes is that instead of 53 minutes with an additional leap second, 53 seconds with an additional leap second every once in a while, the Callistan days would follow 52 seconds. Like, the minutes would be slightly shorter. But again, this 21 hours and 20 minutes is just an average. Like, Io is 21 hours and 14 minutes. Europa is 21 hours and I forget, maybe 20 minutes exactly. And then Ganymede is 21 hours and 28 minutes. So each of them are slightly different and will have slightly different minute lengths. And that's just sort of the other thing that would make the 2A system rough here, is that this is a tight-knit community. We talked about this more last episode, but the Jovian system is like a miniature solar system. People will be going back and forth between the Galilean moons all the time. You could even make it depending on how fast your rockets can go, it could even be a daily commute, right? Like, it's just quick. It's quick travel. At most, it would be like a couple-day journey. It would be like flying off to making a transatlantic flight, or flying to Australia or something from the US. It would be arduous, but like they are very tight-knit communities is, I guess, the point I'm trying to make. So having different cutoffs in the day would just be so weird, because on Io, at 9:14 the clock would just skip to midnight, but then on Ganymede it would take until 9:28, and it would just be all weird. And like, if you just don't really look at the second hand, if you just don't make watches with second hands, it's like analog watches. You could have digital watches with seconds hands, and it just doesn't really matter that much. I feel like it's making the best of a difficult situation. I feel like it's balancing all the different variables as best as possible, I guess. So I don't think it's a great system, but I think it's better than any sort of alternative. Other than, of course, something similar to the Martian option 1, which I would say is the largest competitor here. Again, the Martian option 1 being make it 24 hours, 60 minutes, and 60 seconds, but just make the seconds faster. This is sort of like taking it one level up and saying, instead of making the seconds faster, just make the minutes faster and keep the seconds as long as they used to be. But yeah, what do you think, Jacob?
I feel like the first option where you sped up the second, I think you mentioned speed limits. I think that what you would see if that happened is that you just have a setting for like on the speedometer for your car or space rover.
Yeah.
You would have a setting for Earth, a setting for Mars, and a setting for the Jovian System.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair.
So
also,
I think that,
like, how often are you going to be bringing a car from Earth to the Jovian System? You know what I mean? Like, the cars for the Jovian System would probably be made for the Jovian System and would stay there. So it's actually a bit of a moot point. I'll agree with you that it's like the speed limits probably don't matter as much as we think they do. Because again, they probably have self-driving vehicles at this point, because that's only like 10 years off. So the computers will just do the calculations for them. And also, because of the energy involved in space travel, like the sheer energy to accelerate something up to interplanetary speeds makes it such that it is cheaper to just rent a car in a different planetary system than it would be to transport that car. It's almost cheaper to literally just buy a whole new car once you get there than it would be to bring your car with you. So yeah, so that's interesting. And I mean, think about it.
If you make a big profit.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you take any airplane flight, like, and go on vacation, it's always a rental car. Like, you never really bring your own car with you. That would be very strange. So it would only be like maybe like really rich people, but I don't think they would do that. I feel like, again, it's best to just rent a limousine or whatever, But
yeah, especially since the Jovian moons would be more isolated. So I think that for us Earthlings, Terrans, however you want to say it, adjusting to 89% second would be kind of like unsettling and weird. But for a native European or Callistan or whatever the names for someone born on one of those moons or has lived there a long time would be, it wouldn't seem so strange. And I don't think that the level of travel, especially into early settlement stages when this would be decided, I don't think the traffic would be large enough that the difference in making people like put off balance by that would be as big.
Yeah, I mean, this is interesting because we didn't really talk about it, but you could do something like this for Mars as well. If instead of speeding up the Martian second, slowing down the Martian second, you said, okay, we're just going to have, 62 seconds in a minute, or 61, like 61 or 62. There's just going to be 1 or 2 extra seconds in every minute. You could do that, and that would be pretty similar to what we do here. You keep the SI unit, and it is sort of like sweeping everything under the rug. So I guess this is much more akin to option 1, So option 1 should be split into option 1A and option 1B, which would be, option 1A would be the original one of slowing down the second. Option 1B would be the slowing down the minute and adding more seconds to the minute, or speeding up again in these worlds. But yeah, I don't know. It's a really interesting debate. Like, we'll see what people do, but I guess the option 2 family of like solutions is much more viable on Mars. Like, I would say the option 2 family of solutions are equal contenders to the option 1 family of solutions on Mars, but in the Jovian system, you have to really choose either option 1A or 1B. I think the option 2 family of solutions here is just completely unusable. I don't know. Or not completely, but I would say it's much, much worse. It's much, much more annoying here than it would be on Mars. I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I do think that whatever gets implemented on Mars, though, because of historical precedent, will likely also be the choice used for any other future space exploration.
Mm-hmm. That is interesting.
Whatever is the first.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, whatever is chosen first, either if we settle Mars first or settle Venus first, because then you already have like an economy built around that translation. Like, if you look at the calendar app, if you put something in at like 9 PST, it'll automatically translate to like Eastern time for you. So if you put something in Mars, like a Mars date or a Venusian date, that would automatically translate back to an Earth date. And so the system for that would be already set up. So whatever adjustment system is used for the first space settlement, I think would just be applied to the rest of them, barring like really far out systems that are almost entirely independent from Earth.
Yeah. Well, I'm not so sure though, because say that Venus or the Moon, Luna will probably be colonized first, right? And there, if they follow a 24-hour day, then I don't think people would follow a 24-hour day on Mars. And that's 24 like Earth hours. Because again, if you were to do that on Mars, the sun would rise 37 minutes later every day. And this is a planet where the sun really like matters. Out in the Jovian system, it gets a little tenuous, but I think it still makes an effect. It's about 4% as strong, which is a lot stronger than you would think. That is still many millions of times brighter than the moon, I believe, than a full moon at night. And the full moon at night can actually create shadows. So, of course, only when you are sufficiently far away from light pollution. But it's a really interesting thing, because I feel like, they did a thing about, or I watched something about the crew that operates the Curiosity rover, right? They have the most interesting work schedules on the planet, because it's not even the night shift or the day shift, right? Like if you're working at some store, you might have to work the night shift. But these people have to work a shift that gets 37 minutes later every single day. So on the first day, they get up and go to work, and they're at work at 9 a.m. because the Curiosity rover all the rovers use solar power. And so they only really, and also you don't really bring a flashlight with you, so it works best during the day to operate it, during the Martian day. So on the first day, these people go into work at 9 a.m. But then on the second day, they go into work at like 9:40. On the third day, they go in at 10:20. And eventually, over the course of like 36-ish days, they eventually make the entire loop around the day cycle. So sometimes they are, working like from 10 p.m. all straight through the night into like 5 a.m. And sometimes they are working a regular day shift. And it sucks. It is only offset, the only reason you would put up with that is if you are operating the Curiosity rover, right? Like, that is sufficiently cool. That is a job sufficiently cool enough to put up with that.
Mhm.
But if you were, just trying to live your life on a different planet, once that becomes fairly mundane, people would not really follow that. People would be like, this is stupid. So they'll probably go with an option 1 or option 2 family of solutions versus, I guess we could call that first one option 0, just because it's like, do not change anything. So people would have to, like on Mars, do an option 1 or option 2. And in the same vein, I feel like on the Jovian system, if on Mars they do an option 2, on the Jovian system, I feel like the option 2 would just be intolerable. And the reason for that they might justify that and say this isn't breaking precedent, would be that in the Martian system, they're adding a little bit. Whereas in the Jovian system, they would be subtracting a significant amount. And so they would say, like, that's different, that's a different thing we're doing here. So we don't want to follow that. I don't know.
One thing I'm wondering is if the Jovian system would choose option 0 because the sun would be on a number of days. I'm not sure if this is true, but the sun could potentially be blocked out by Jupiter on a number of days. And because people would be primarily inside of like enclosed settlements on the Jovian system. Like I think on the Martians system, there's a lot more potential for like driving around outside or something. But I'm thinking that if you're in the Jovian system, you're probably in the equivalent of like, if you think of like the almost like an underground city, except it could be above ground, but it'd just be completely shut out from the outdoors because it would be completely just climate-wise intolerable.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, Mars is pretty, like they don't have an atmosphere or anything, and they do like go on the surface,
True.
but like they would probably want to go on the surface. But that is really interesting. I'm about to do a calculation for the Jupiter. I'm trying to see how large is Jupiter in the sky of these planets. So that is, let's see. So I'm trying to do some trig here. Opposite over adjacent is tangent, right? So, okay. Yeah. All right. So Jupiter, let me get the... yeah, these are very interesting questions. I bet like all the, future colonists will be thinking about these questions as well. They'll be just wondering about it. So mean radius. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Mean radius. Let's see what we get. Oh, why would you give me radians? Oh boy, okay. Radians 2 degrees now. Okay. So the size of Jupiter in the sky of these planets would be 19 degrees. That's the angular diameter. And that is 38 times as large as the sun or the moon appears in our sky. So this would be, and that's for Io, which is the closest to Jupiter. So the other ones might have a smaller vision of Jupiter in their sights. But yeah, they would get eclipses often. But I don't know. I still just get the feeling that the actual day length will have some significance there. I'm not sure they could completely throw it out. Although I do agree with you, I think option 0 is more likely than the option 2 family, I would say. But I would say that if they are going to try to track the day length, they've got to go with option 1, either A or B, or they could just do option 0 and not track the day length. Probably the first few missions might go with option 0 for a while, but then, I don't know, I feel like once people begin to settle in, they'll change things. This is just, it's sort of unprecedented space travel because often we try to harken back to different periods of like exploration. Like you go back to the sort of European, like investigating the Americas, or even just expanding like the American frontier. But there was never a like point in time where we had to change our clocks to adapt to like different day lengths. It's always just been, if they did have a clock, they would just, like a mission clock, they would just set it to be equivalent to their local day. Actually, in a lot of the early voyages, they had a problem because I think it's like the pendulum clocks just didn't work because you're on a boat that's like rocking back and forth, so the pendulums will get off. And that was it was problematic to the missions because there's a calculation you can do if you have a precise clock that like can tell you where you are longitude wise, so you can know like your coordinates. And I'm pretty sure, I forget who it was some sort of famous inventor, scientist person around this era, like received a lot of money from some king for making a clock that wasn't pendulum based and like was accurate on ships, and they were like, thank you, we will pay you millions of dollars for this discovery, like this invention. I just can't remember who that was, but yeah. So all interesting questions. The Jovian system just gives us this big, complex, like, it would be much easier if it were only one body, but of course we have 4 Galilean moons. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. Again, I'll leave it up to the viewer. You know,
I wouldn't just add one thing that.
Yeah.
Thinking about it more, it does seem to me that option 1 would be later on be phased in, because if you think about who's settling there, it's going to be people who have like some involvement with science predominantly.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
they would need to be calculating like, how can we like have a trajectory from here to the next moon or to Mars or back to Earth. And I think it'd be a lot cleaner if you just could calculate instead of days, instead of like decimal points of a day, of an Earth day. But yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Option 1 would be the chosen family.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just very interesting. Because yeah, that is an interesting thing to think about, the like composition of the colonists. Because I would say on Mars, well, I feel like it'll always be like scientific personnel first, and then more like residential people. But not many residential people are going to be wanting to go to the Jovian system to like start a family or something for a very long while after its colonization. Like compared to Mars, like, you know what I mean? Because
yeah. And even with Earth, by the time that they get there, the scientists would have already set up whatever time system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, by the time that scientists get to the Jovian system, the Martian system will still have plenty of space to expand, I guess. And so, you know, say we get to the Jovian system 10 or 20 years after we first set foot on the Martian system, you'll get the like more corollary colonists going to Mars first because it's more desirable. And it would take a while before like regular people begin to go to the Jovian system because, again, you'll have a very dim sun in the sky, although it's still there, but just very like not that prominent. And it's just a very alien world. Like these are alien worlds, very much so, because you'll look up into the sky and see Jupiter, massive and imposing and frightening, like taking up like a huge swath of the sky. Whereas on Mars, things are pretty similar, except there just isn't a large moon. There's 2 smaller moons. So yeah, it's just very interesting to ponder, I guess. So yeah, Mars will probably take away the Jovian system's more residential colonists. And so that makes me think they'll do option 1B specifically, because if they're all scientists, they'll be looking at the second for the SI unit. And 1B, again, is the one we have on screen right now. So that would be more conducive to scientists, I think.
Well, yeah, I think that's the Jovian system.
I think we got the full extent of that. The other ones will be quicker.
The other ones, like, and I think the entire rest of what we got today is going to go a lot faster than that. This is definitely the most intrinsic and detail-oriented
that was
segment.
A very deep...
Yeah, it was a good conversation, though.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, again, up to the audience. What do you think about this issue? But yeah, so we can move on to the Saturnian system.
Ooh, that's nice. Jacob, your camera fits perfectly into the text. That's super nice. Yes.
So we have more chat. So before we get started, okay. Barry Rudin says, "Lol, all of your Central European viewers, haha." She also says, "Very interesting topic of conversation. Time." Okay, and then we've got Scandinavy says, "Imagine, how do I join the call? I have some options." Again, I do not know who that is, but I think
I'll just say, if there's one person we don't want in the call,
it's Scandinavy.
It's Scandinavy.
I want to know who that person is now.
No offense, yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so the Saturnian system is interesting.
Put your ideas in the comments.
Yeah, throw your ideas in the comments.
Yeah, put the ideas in the chat. So the Saturnian system is different from the Jovian system in that people can actually inhabit Saturn itself. And it's also different in that it has fewer major moons. It really just has Titan. There are other moons that we talked about in the last episode, like 5 or 6 of them, that are all in a different sort of class. They are spherical, so I think they do count as major moons because they are spherical, but I guess I'm sort of talking about lunar-like, like lunar class objects here. So the Galilean moons are very similar to our moon in terms of surface gravity. They have, between 10 and 20% surface gravity, whereas the Saturnian system Titan, again, is very similar in that respect, but the other 5 to 6 moons we had been talking about have surface gravities around 2 or 3%. So they are significantly smaller, and much more similar to like asteroids and stuff. So they might not really think about the actual rising and setting of the sun. Also, we are further out into the solar system, and the further out you get, the less and less it matters. So the more and more option 1 or option 0 could be more viable. But the Saturnian system, assuming that they do care about the sun, they could actually strike something very similar to what they do on in the Jovian system. And so that is, the Saturnian day is about 10.5 hours long. So if you simply double that, then you get a day length that is 21 hours and 7 minutes long, which is very similar, eerily similar to the lengths in the Jovian system. Also, on Titan, if you divide the day, the Titanian day is 15 days, 22 hours, and 41 minutes long. And so naturally you might think, oh, what if we divide that by 16? We could get something very similar to 24 hours, but not quite, a little shorter than 24 hours. And that would be nice. But I think it's very likely that instead they would divide that into 18 days, and that would give you something 21 hours and 16 minutes long, which is, again, similar to the Jovian system, also similar to Saturn itself. And yeah, so I think that's something to think about.
Yeah, this one's definitely a lot more cut and dry than Jupiter, just because of number of celestial bodies, but also I wouldn't necessarily say nicer numbers, but in a couple of ways.
In some ways, although I think there's a big debate to be had about cutting the Titanian day into 16 equal segments or 18 equal segments for the sake of Earth. Or you could cut it into 15.9 segments for the sake of that's just option 0. So there's some things to consider. What we have listed here is essentially the same setup as option 1B on the Jovian system, which is the short minutes with fewer seconds in them. And of course you could do option 1A here, which is just seconds that are themselves shorter and having 60 of them in a minute. And again here, I think the option 2 family is not as viable. But then we can think of option 0. And option 0, I think, is a lot more tempting out here because of a few reasons. One, the sun is dimmer, right? So it's not really as major of a thing. But also, Titan has a day length that is 15 days and 22 hours long, which is much more similar to the day length on the moon than to, something like the Earth or the Galilean moons. And so if you have this, 15-hour, 22-minute day, it might not really matter when exactly the sun rises because, slicing the day up into an integer number of segments, it gives you the benefit of scheduling. So on Io, with days that are split in half, it means that you can have one day where, say midnight starts at sunrise, and then at the end of the day, it's sunset. And then the next day starts at sunset and begins again at sunrise. On Europa, you could have one day that spans from sunrise until noon. The next day goes from noon to sunset, and so on and so on. But on Titan, with 16 segments or 18 segments, it begins to be like, does it really matter if the sun rises specifically at 6 a.m. on the 16th or 18th day, right? Like people might be like, whatever. They might just be like, who cares? And so if that is the case, then you could do option 0. And so this, again, brings us back to the question of the demographics of the colonists, because if the people colonizing the Saturnian system are people from the Jovian system, you will probably get something much more similar to option 1A or 1B or whatever they choose on Jupiter. But if these are people from Earth, you might actually just get an option 0 out here, because option 0 on Saturn is in the Saturnian system is much easier than option 0 in the Jovian system, I would say, because option 1 and like cutting the days doesn't really matter as much. So those are some things to think about. And so I tend to think that those who colonize the Saturnian system are likely going to be from Jupiter. I think there's going to be a sort of camaraderie of the outer worlds. I think they're going to have like an outer world federation or something.
Nice. Yeah.
Because basically, again, we have a good comparison here of the American frontier and the practices that went into colonizing the American frontier were like, you would get a plot of land, but once you got that plot of land, you would farm it so intensively and non-sustainably that it would just deplete the soil in a few years and it would be unusable. So then you would just move further west. So if there is some sort of process like that, then you would have the Saturnian colonists being the Jovian colonists, and then the Uranian colonists being the Saturnian colonists, because they're like sort of using up their systems. But again, this is space, and it would be very difficult to use up an entire moon. But of course, you could also have some people that they have that wanderlust inside of them. They are like, that is what they love to do. So first they go to the Jovian system and they get the glory of, founding a colony, and they're like, yay, I'm a founder. This is so great. This is so fun. But then 10 years go by and they're like, okay, this is like pretty settled. People are just living normal lives. Where's the next frontier? And then they would go out to Saturn, and then go out to Uranus and Neptune. And it's just sort of, it's like the 80-20 rule, right? Is that like 80% of the founders, how do I phrase this? It's like of colonies, right? Of any given city, 80% of them will probably share 20% of founders, if you get what I'm saying. Because there's no reason why you can only found one city. And those who found one city are likely to be the kind of person that would want to found another city. Like, you're already predisposed. If you're like, oh, I very much enjoyed founding this city on Jupiter, establishing things and whatnot. So, of course, they would enjoy doing it on Saturn as well. You know what I mean? So it's not like every single person will move on. It's more like you've got, say, 100 initial colonists to the Jovian system. 95 of them, want a new life for them and their family, but 5 of them are going out there for the glory and just the fun, I guess, the satisfaction they get from setting up a new world. And those 5 people would likely join the expedition headed to Saturn,
Yeah.
And so that's why I think that the outer worlds will be very interrelated, very connected with each other in terms of culture.
They'll probably also have if they're being represented back on Earth, they'll have similar interests in a way, where they share a similar lifestyle where it's dark. They're living in essentially mobile submarines in a way, that are on the ground, and so I think that because of similar challenges and therefore similar living conditions, they'd have similar political interests and political beliefs, leading them to form a EU type federation.
Yeah, it's just so fascinating. I wonder what'll happen out here in the outer reaches of the solar system. But yeah, so since I think that option 1B is the most likely in the Jovian system, I would just then again say I think option 1B with a Titanian day that is 1/18th as long as the true Titanian day is the most likely option. So we're getting into a ton of subcategories here. You could have 1B with 1/18th or 1/16th. You could have 1A with 1/18th or 1/16th. Same with the option 2 subgroups, because who picks how you subdivide the Titanian day? And this is, again, if you get a ton of colonists from Earth, right? If Titan is primarily colonized by people from Earth, you'll probably get them saying, well, I'm used to a 24-hour day. Why not just subdivide the day into 16 equal segments? That is roughly familiar to what I have at home. You would just shave off a few minutes at the end of each day. I am very satisfied with this. But if you have people from the Jovian system primarily colonizing Titan, then they would be like, oh, well, I'm used to 21 and a half hours where I come from. So that's what I'll establish here. I will divide the Titanian day into 18 equal segments. So that is, very much about the composition of the colonists. Also, if the colonists are from Mars or Venus, they will also probably prefer subdivisions of 1/16th, or again, just option 0. The Venusians would probably like option 0. The Martians would probably prefer 1/16th or even 1/15th, because their day is longer, so they're used to something a bit longer. Just all these different considerations to think about. But the point is, if the colonists of Titan are fellow outer worlders, which I suspect them to be, then they would probably pick 1/18th as their preferable subdivision. And it just works well with the Saturnian, if 2 Saturn days is roughly that long as well. But again, if it's Martians or Terrans or Loons or Venusians, it's probably going to be option 0 or 1/16th or 1/15th. So lots of different possibilities.
Yeah.
I just always think about posterity in these more speculative live streams, and I wonder if there are, people looking back at the archives right now, and by right now I mean in 200 years, and they're like, ha, all of these options were wrong, and we did something completely different.
We now have the 17-minute hour.
The 17-minute hour, exactly.
But Saturnian System, and Saturn is everyone's favorite planet, man.
I love Saturn.
People, they're always like, Saturn, it's got rain, but it also has one of the dopest moons ever. Titan is a seriously baller moon, gotta say.
Titan is probably the best outer world moon. I will agree with you there. It has got to be the best.
We should tier list this at some point. All the moons. I would say that Titan, Europa, and Luna are all S tier moons.
I would say Titan alone is S tier.
You wouldn't call Europa an S tier moon?
Okay, Europa might be S tier, but Luna is not, unfortunately.
Are you serious?
It's just not. It's not.
You're capping, dude.
It's very run of the mill.
No, it isn't.
No atmosphere.
First of all, okay, when you look into the star,
Europa doesn't have an atmosphere.
I need you to listen. I need you to listen.
I'm listening.
No matter what happens, right? No matter how bad your day was, you can look up in the sky and you can see Luna, and it is your marker that everything is all right. There have been so many poems about Luna. There have been so many songs about Luna. When we got to Luna, the entire planet rejoiced, and it sparked an entire space age. You know, it marked a new landscape for humans. It is one of the greatest markers of human progress that we have in all of human history. I think to leave Luna, yes, you must take in all aspects when you're looking at a tier list.
I know, but it's so arbitrary. Had we been life forms that evolved on Saturn, then Titan would be like double S tier, because it's sentimental and it's just a great moon.
I think
gotta look at
a great moon. I think it's pretty. I think it's also a pretty moon. You know, I think it is. It's very nice.
I mean, that's just, again, that's arbitrary. That is completely arbitrary.
You know what else is arbitrary?
What's arbitrary?
I was gonna say your mom, but she's watching this stream. Hey, Barry. They're not arbitrary. Yep. I'm sorry. But yeah, we can go over to the Uranian. I don't know. We should tier list. We should tier list them at some point.
Just very briefly, I want to say the other moons of Saturn, as well as the other moons of Jupiter, like the small asteroids and stuff, would likely just follow their neighbors. Just pick one of their neighbors that they like. So in the Jovian System, the other moons are all like small asteroids. So those small asteroid colonies would be like, who do we trade with the most? Io, Europa, Ganymede, or Callisto, and whichever one it is, they will just follow that.
Definitely
clock.
Europa.
And then,
you got to get that Aquafina.
It depends where they are, because some of the very distant moons, some of the moons of Jupiter take like an actual like Earth year to orbit Jupiter. Yeah. Like that's how far out they are. They'd probably follow Callisto, and it really just depends. But on Saturn, you'd probably just have all the different moons following Titan. So there's that. But yeah, so now the Uranian System.
Again, Jacob, you are just fitting into it perfectly. I need to do no on-stream editing. This is perfect.
Very wonderful. Yes. So the Uranian System, I do not like the Uranian System's given day lengths, I will say. They are the worst possible consideration. Okay, so look at this. You've got the day length on Uranus is 17 hours and 14 minutes long. And the reason that is so horrible is that it is very close to the square root of 2 over 2 times as long as a day on Earth. And basically the two worst possible day lengths for terraforming is the square root of 2 times 24 or the square root of 2 over 2 times 24. And the reason for that is that a 17-hour day is too short just for living comfortably. So, all right, how about we double that? Make that twice as long. That might be more comfortable. Okay, well now you have a day that is 34 hours long, which is still not comfortable and still intolerable, I would argue, for humans. I think that the limit of, and this is interesting, because we do not actually know, the 21, because what we've been discussing thus far for, Jupiter and Saturn might not actually be possible for humans to have a 21-hour and 20-minute day length. Certainly insomnia will be more common on these outer worlds, and they will likely, you would probably see, if you did like polling and a study like many years in the future, you would see the outer worlds, if they adopt an option 1 or option 2, anything other than option 0, you will likely see higher rates of insomnia and prescriptions for insomnia medication. And that is because it's like they have to go to bed 2.5 hours earlier every night, which is like having daylight savings day, but 2.5 times worse every single night. So that's just something to think about. But that might be possible for humans to adapt to. There is no way humans can adapt to a 17-hour or a 34-hour like day length. That's just completely out of the realm of like my consideration. The usual limits I put like as absolute barriers, like do not cross this line, here there be dragons, is plus or minus 4 hours. So that gives you anywhere between 20 hours and 28 hours for a day length. And I think those boundaries, the edges, are really pushing it. Like, I think that would be kind of rough. But back to Uranus, basically the point is 17 hours is outside of that limit, and 34 hours is also outside of that limit. So you can't do anything nice with the days. You can't get an integer, multiple, or fraction. But you can do an integer ratio. The ratio we picked here was 5 to 4, which is just kind of like, it's still... I think they should probably just option 0, or like option 0B, which is basically just take the Titanian or Jovian system. It just depends, again, on who the colonists are, and just throw out the day length of Uranus itself. And the reason we don't have any moons listed is that all the moons here are like the major minor moons, I guess you could call them, or the minor major moons. The ones with 2 to 3% surface gravity. Uranus doesn't have any Titan-esque moons or Galilean-esque moons. They're all tinier, so we didn't put them down. But
yeah,
if you do, 5 human days for every, it's 4 human days for every 5 Uranian days. So this is just, again, I even got it mixed up when I just said it. Although I stumble over my words a lot. But it's just very weird. What you would get is like, on the first day, the sun would rise at, say, 6 a.m. But then on the second day, it would rise at, 6 hours earlier and earlier and earlier. It would just be kind of weird. So they might just want to throw it out entirely and go with option 0. Or I guess now we're subdividing option 0 into like option 0 Earth, option 0 Mars, option 0 whatever. Because if these are colonists from Earth, they would likely just take the Earth clock and match it. If they're from Mars, Mars clock. If they are from Jupiter or Saturn, the sort of outer world standard they might adopt. So that's what you'd get here. And again, the same thing about the seconds. You could either make them shorter or make the minutes shorter, what have you, right? And this also applies to the major minor moons of Uranus, is that you could just follow something like, and the sun's weaker out here, so it also is probably more of like, they could get away with option 0 much easier. Mm-hmm. So I personally think the most likely thing might be that they just take the Titanian standard. I don't know. That would be my guess. That Uranus just adopts what they do on Titan, and again, what they do on Titan would mirror what they do on Jupiter. So this is like a bit of a chain reaction, but the Jovian system has actual physical standards, physical reasons to do a 21.5-hour day, the rotation rate of their moons. Titan can either have something roughly Earth-like or roughly Jovian-like, and I am, making the assumption that they would choose something roughly Jovian-like over something roughly Earth-like. And now I'm assuming also that Uranus would do something roughly Titan-like over anything else. So this is like a series of assertions, I guess. But I don't know. That's just my prediction. That's just what I think is the most likely and the most optimal. Because a lot of space travel will have to be putting up with tough situations. Already, if everything else was bad enough about space travel, you've got no atmosphere, so whenever you want to go outside of your little like cramped, habitation space, you got to put on a suit, and the radiation, the UV, will kill you because there's no magnetic fields. On top of all that, the day length is usually just some random number, so the sun is just rising and setting at random times, and you are just probably very tired. So,
haha, yeah. 17-hour day go burr.
No, you can't just follow a 17-hour day. Haha, 17-hour day go burr.
Yeah, the Uranian system is just scuffed because of how whacked it is. Yeah.
Well, also another thing to think about actually is that Uranus is on its side, which means that significant parts of the planet are going to be essentially polar regions, which means that they will just have straight sunlight for a very long time and then straight nighttime for a very long time, like Barrow, Alaska, or like northern sections of Scandinavian countries. They got that midnight sun type of thing, except here, instead of the night sun lasting a few weeks in winter, they will last a few years in winter because the year length is 84 years long. So each season of the year is 21 years long, just for one season to pass. So if you think that winter is long now, you've got on Uranus 21 year long winters, which is just crazy. And it doesn't really matter because it's like, oh, okay, the temperature is 200 degrees too cold instead of 100 degrees too cold. Like the temperature will kill me by 200 degrees instead of 100 degrees right now. Oh well. So yeah, but that's that.
Yeah.
So now we go to Neptune. And Neptune's interesting. Here we have Neptune actually breaking the outer world trend. And it might do that, it might not. It's, again, sort of arbitrary. Because here on the Neptunian system, we have the moon Triton, which I guess you could say is a major, minor, major moon, because it has a surface gravity about 8%. So it isn't quite as large as the Galilean and Titanian and lunar standards, but it really isn't as small as the other moons we've been thinking about. So we decided to include it for today's purposes. So Neptune has a 16-hour day, which is similarly annoying as Uranus. And Triton has a 6-day-long day, which could be divided into 6. Or I think if you divide it into 7, you get something more similar to the other outer worlds. But the reason that we chose to go with just a division by 6 is that a division by 7 is closer to the other outer worlds, but it's more like 20 hours and 30 minutes, which is really like skirting that boundary, and I think we might find it sort of inhospitable. And so people might prefer something more similar to Earth. And again, they might just go with an option 0, whatever option 0 they pick. So yeah, there's just a lot of things. It's so strange. The further out we go, the less certain it is, because the more things you have to think about. When it comes to Mars, it's simple because you've got a day length that is very similar to the length of the day on Earth. But then once you go up to Jupiter, and also on Mars, the colonists are going to be from Earth. But then when you get out to Jupiter, it's like the colonists might be from Earth or Mars, and there are some physical standards, blah, 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 blah. And then you get out to Saturn, and it's like, what's going on? It just gets like progressively crazier. It's like the Caretaker, right? The Everywhere at the End of Time. It just gets progressively like fuzzier, the future.
It's tough. I still only got like 20 minutes in, and
then
something in me was like, turn back.
Turn back, right? That is exactly what. Do you know what we're talking about, Jacob?
No, but I'm thinking of Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, where the episodes just get progressively weirder and weirder.
It's kind of like that.
Yeah.
It's this song created by like it's not. I mean, it's a song. But it's an album, and it is 6 hours long, and it was created specifically to be a like metaphor for like the stages of dementia. And
So
it's just
yeah,
really
basically like at
fascinating.
it's actually like 6 albums like stitched together.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
each one is like a different stage of dementia. So the first one starts with like old-timey music that's like clear and stuff, and then it just basically
But
gets
slightly
more and more
distorted.
distorted.
Yeah.
It's
pretty
like
crazy.
And in the end, is it just like bass boosted or something? Or...
in the end it's almost indistinguishable, but then there's like a minute of silence at the end.
Oh. I'm getting chills just thinking about this album.
Dude, it's terrifying.
I've listened to like the first 3 hours of it, which is where it's like pretty normal. But again, the thing is that it's hard to just sit down and listen to 6 hours
That's
of music.
also true.
This was like a year ago when life was relatively carefree. But now I am like sitting down and listening to something for 6 hours. Are you crazy? That is never going to happen. Not in junior year. So, yeah. But anyway, so Neptune, it's really hard to say what they would do, but this is sort of what you're presented with. And out in Neptune is like 30 astronomical units away from the sun, which means that the sun on Neptune is 1/900th as bright as on Earth, which is like 7-ish orders of magnitude less, which puts the sun, instead of being at negative 26.7, at like negative 20, which the full moon, again, is at like negative 12. So this is still many times brighter than a full moon, which is just so weird, like how bright the sun actually is. That's why you're not supposed to look at it. But it would be like a very overcast day just constantly. It would be like the darkest thunderstorm. Like, you know how during a thunderstorm, so it's like a cloud might pass over and it's slightly dimmer for a second and you don't really notice, it gets brighter and dimmer. You ever get that moment where you're like, oh, look, the sun must have passed over. But then on a rainy day, it's a bit darker. But when there's a thunderstorm, like you can tell it's a thunderstorm just based on the light level. Have you ever noticed that? How it's like much darker when it's a thunderstorm specifically instead of just a rainstorm?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And then here in Florida, and even up in Connecticut, when we would get the occasional tropical storm, you can tell that it's a hurricane-like event, just because of how dark it is. And also for some reason how I feel like there's always like a tint of like yellow or like green for some reason. But anyway, I digress. It's like the darkest hurricane you can ever imagine. So very heavy cloud cover constantly is a similar level of light to the amount of light you would get here on Neptune, just regular day. So very.
So it'd just be like England then. So you would just have all the senators be British.
Yeah,
and they'd be like, just like home.
British. They're used to it. Yeah, that's a good idea. But yeah, so I don't know what they would do here. Really, it depends on who is colonizing the system and for what purpose. If as we like contemplated in previous episodes, if Neptune is like the last stop before interstellar travel, like if Neptune's like a big depot for interstellar travel, where it's like when you want to go to Hawaii, for instance, you always have to go through LAX or SFO, and if you are on Neptune, interstellar travel might be similar for Neptune. And so if it is like that, Neptune might be more conducive to an option 0, Earth-based option 0, because that's likely what they would do, the clock they would have on the interstellar mission. And then if again it is colonized by fellow outer worlders, then you might get an option 0 that is based on the outer worlds. And yeah, I guess that's that. Not much more to say here.
Right. So yeah.
But yeah.
Now we get to
space.
The final frontier.
Yeah. So this is just deep space, or it could just be, basically the point is these are free-floating colonies. These are just asteroid colonies that are in either heliocentric orbits or other star-centric orbits, or just out in interstellar space making a voyage, just doing their own thing generally. So the question is, what clocks would they use? And there's a few possibilities. So option 0, copy Earth. And this is, option 0A, because this is just the primary thing you would do. If these people are from Earth, Earth would be a bit of a standard. Although I do say a lot in this series that Mars is likely at one point to become the capital of the solar system. Like, I think Mars is, because of its positioning between the outer system and the inner system, it is at a great nexus point to become a, capital. It's like you're looking at, the strait between, the Black Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. Where Constantinople used to be, where Istanbul is. It's like you're looking at that. When I look at Mars, it's like looking at that place, but no one lives there. It's like, oh, that is so perfect. That is the perfect location,
Some prime land for the taking.
Yeah, exactly. It is like it's like the perfect port city, and that is what I feel like Mars is. And so if that is the case, then interstellar missions and just the sort of solar system standard for travel would be Mars instead. So that's your second option. That's option 0B, is copy another planet, whether that be Mars or the Jovian Federation, or, well, I think those are your three main ones. So you've got Earth, Mars, or Jovian would be the standard. One of those three would likely be the standard for the interstellar mission. And then, of course, you could also forge your own, which would just be sort of like a star date, like in Star Trek. How does the star date work in Star Trek?
Isn't it just completely BS? I think
it might be. Well, I thought it's like they say star date something 0.1 through 9, because I think it's supposed to be 1/10 of a, it's just days, really. The star date is just a normal count of days. So when you leave in your log star date 24,399.1, you are sort of saying roughly what time of day it is without being specific. It's like saying March 3rd at 6 6 a.m. or p.m. While it was really at 6:37, you're just just 6. So I feel like that's how the star date in Star Trek is. But there are possible systems, there are possible ways to sort of make a star date that is very logical. And I like this sort of idea, which is basically starting at the unit of seconds. Is there a way to have, X seconds in a minute, X in an hour, X in a day, and then X days in a week, X weeks in a month? Something that follows the same scaling, at every level. Because right now...
Yeah, sorry, you can finish your thought, but... go ahead.
Okay, so at every level, we have, weird different things. So you start with 60 seconds in a minute, and then 60 minutes in an hour, but then there's 24 hours in a day, but then there's 7 days in a week, and then there's 4-ish weeks in a month, 12 in a year, and it's pretty random. But there might be a way that you could do a standard scaling, and I'll get to that in a second. But yeah, what were you going to say?
Right now the current star date is 98704.49.
98704.49. Nice. Star date 98704.49.
Lasagna research has stalled.
Lasagna research is stalling. Anyway, but yeah, so I actually designed one for my book, which is it's this one sect, this it's like a new religion that forms in, the time between 2020 and 2102. And what they do is they have their stardate system The foundational unit, of course, is the SI unit of the second, but then they double the second. And so then from there, you have just scaling by factors of 6, and they use base 6 for counting instead of base 10. So you have 36 seconds in a minute, 36 minutes in an hour, and 36 hours in a day. And these seconds are twice as long as normal seconds, exactly twice as long, though, which makes it like convenient for science, you know, because it's not like that weird number 2.37% off, right? Like it still sort of stays with the SI unit, like it's a simple conversion, right? And when you do that and then, you know, scale it up by 36 each time, then you have a day length that is roughly 26 hours long. So they live by a 26-hour long day. But then what you do from there is you have 6 days in a week, 6 weeks in a month, and then I think it's 6 months in a year, right? And so you could represent that as a simple base 6 number, and you could do the stardate system except in a more convenient manner. So you could say, you know, stardate and then some very big number with a decimal point in the middle. You know, you could do like 111, 111, 111.111111, right? And so that would just be very beneficial, I think, for some purposes, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be pretty useful. You know, because imagine, you can say, like, you don't have to specify the units, essentially. You don't have to say, like, oh, it is the year 2020, it is the month of January. It is just, it's simple numbers all the way up and down.
I am all for
I like it.
The, like, if I was going to start a space colony, I'm all for the system of time where all time is dependent on whatever I say it is. Just, I will make announcements at no clear interval throughout the day and be like, the time is now 4:13 p.m. And then, like, some unit of time later, I'll be like, the time is now 11:57 a.m. And it'll just leave people confused. And it will also be just completely insane, because I would be the only person on this colony
who knows what time it is.
No, the only person
can be
at
whatever
all.
You want.
Yeah.
You'll be the only person at all. Abolish time.
Abolish time.
It's really interesting.
I sleep when I sleepy, I wake when I wakey.
When I wakey. There's some islands in, like, Japan or something where, like, they don't really think of time as rigidly as we do, which is pretty cool. And, like, that's the island where, like, people live forever, like, to 100. 100 years is now forever certified. But it's, like, the average life expectancy is 100. It's, like, the island with the highest life expectancy on Earth. And, like, one of the things they do there is that they don't say, like, I will meet you at 2 p.m. If you are 5 minutes late, I will be very angry with you. They'll say, oh, I'll see you in the afternoon, which means, of course, literally anything between noon and sunset, which is like a 6-hour range, which is just interesting.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Something like that.
Yeah,
but...
they would make great friends with, like cable repair people.
Yes.
You know, it's like, oh, I'll be there somewhere between 2 p.m. on Friday and 11 a.m. next.
Yeah, I think some of those people that don't really adhere to time have found employment at the Department of Motor Vehicles.
Exactly. Yep. So yeah, but this is, again, just interesting. What might they do out in space? I think it would be cool if they got a Stardate standard system.
Yeah.
I like the one that I came up with personally because I came up with it. So, of course I like it because I came up with it.
Yes.
I just think it's nice.
Nepotism.
Yeah. Yes, nepotism. Well, because I also like that it's base 6, which I think is pretty cool. Better than base 10.
Wow. Strong opinion.
Yeah, not really. I think everyone agrees. They just think there's no way we could implement that, which I'll grant. I'll grant that there is no way we could implement that. But I don't know. You prefer base 12. I don't know. I feel like base 12. A lot of people think of base 12, but it's like you have to dream a little bigger.
You know what I prefer? I prefer base 10. I prefer
Base
base 10. It's because guess what? Look at this. I got 10 fingers.
Okay. Okay.
And yeah,
But
I got a hypothesis. I think you do too.
I will neither confirm nor deny that statement.
Base 10, I think it's the best. I think it is the best unit of measure.
Look at me, Sebastian.
Oh no,
Look at
it
me.
cannot be. He's got 6 fingers.
Yeah. Maybe you can count on your Wolverine.
You have 6
claws
fingers on your
instead.
right hand.
Yeah.
You killed
You can
my
just
father.
count on your Wolverine claws, right? I think that's better.
Yeah. But anyways, yeah, that's space.
Anyway, yeah, space.
That's how we should end this season. Anyways, that's space.
Anyways, that's space. Yeah, that should be the last.
But yeah,
remark.
now we're gonna move into calendars. This section's definitely
Yep.
gonna go a lot faster than clocks because
Yeah, because this isn't as I guess this isn't as intimate in your life. Like, this isn't as much of a concern in your life. You know, it's February 7th. Okay, like, whatever. It's just about counting, really. Like, this won't give you insomnia unless you stay awake at night because of the excesses of the Gregorian calendar. That keeps me up at night. The inefficiencies of the Gregorian calendar. I cannot sleep at night because of it. But yeah, so let's look at the other worlds. So let's start with Venus. Just as Venus is likely, in my opinion, to just copy what the Earth does for days, I think it's also likely that they just copy what the Earth does for years. So just the Gregorian calendar as we have it right now, 12 months and 30-ish days in a month. So whatever day it is on Earth, it's exactly the same time and day on Venus. And the reason for that is that its year length is a bit shorter than it is on Earth, but it doesn't really matter because they don't have significant seasons. And again, because they have this incredibly long day length, it means that like the variations in temperature on Venus are much more related to the day-night cycle than they are to the year cycle. I think Venus actually has like almost 0 axial tilt. And by 0, I mean 180, because it is upside down. But it doesn't have like seasons if it were to be a normal planet that wasn't covered in, CO2. So yeah, just the year is very irrelevant. The Venusian year, irrelevant. They would probably just copy Earth.
Bow. Got him.
Irrelevant. Yeah. So now we get to Luna, and Luna is interesting. So they might, again, just follow Earth.
Jacob, you're in the Matrix dodging these text boxes.
Yep. So,
Wait, I have a...
Oh, he's going back.
Okay,
Nice.
reclining chair for the win. My earbuds fell out.
Reclining chair. But yeah, so Luna
Pathetic.
could follow Earth.
Pathetic.
Pathetic. And I think actually the colonization of the moon presents a rare opportunity to change to something that might be better than the Gregorian calendar, and that is a lunisolar calendar, where you have months that are exactly as long as one moon cycle, but then also you have leap months instead of leap days. So some calendars actually do this already. I think the Chinese calendar and the Jewish calendar already do this. So those calendars already exist. And basically what it would entail is every other month approximately, you would have 1 month that is 29 days long, and then the next month would be 30 days long. And that is because one day on the moon is 29 days and 12 hours, which means that that's how long it takes for the phases to go. In the Gregorian calendar, on average, the months are 30.4 days long, which is a whole day longer than the moon cycle, which is very unfortunate because it means that the full moon has no bearing on reality. I will ask you this question: when is the next full moon? I don't think you can answer.
I can't answer.
I have no idea.
I can answer. Because I noticed.
After you look it up?
No. My hands are off the keyboard.
Okay.
Keyboard. I'm saying. Okay, I remember noticing that the moon was full a bit ago, and I think a bit ago was about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks. So I would say that in 2 weeks, I'm calling that the next full moon, and I will round it. I'm saying the next full moon is on February 22nd.
It's actually February 27th.
Ooh, okay. 5 days off. 5 days off. Not bad.
But wouldn't it be nice if you knew the full moon will be on the first day of every month? Like, you know that for a fact. You know that to be true.
I know nothing to be true.
I know nothing to be true.
I am an enigma.
Where it is slightly nice, it is slightly better for people on Earth. You might think, like, who really cares? The people on the moon would care, and it might be nice to sort of have a unified Earth-Luna calendar, because on the moon, what this would mean is that every colony on the moon would have a precise date where the sun rises and sets every month. So if you are if you are on the meridian of the moon, like wherever this meridian happens to be, then you could actually get, on the first day of the month, the sun will rise, and on the 14th day of the month, the sun will set, or 15th, 14, or 15, every single time. But if you are, any given longitude on the moon will have a precise date where the sun rises and sets every month. And I think that would be very beneficial to the people of Luna. I think that would be very helpful. A very easy thing to predict. Like, say that you want to, do some activity that requires the real sun to be up rather than the artificial lighting that you have in your colony. And you say, oh, what's the next date we can do that? If we go by the Gregorian calendar, you'll have to pull out your, charts and blah 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 and look it up. But if we switch over to a lunisolar calendar, then you can just say, okay, it has to be after the 7th because the sun rises on the 7th. And I think that would be very beneficial. So I petition, we should change to a lunisolar calendar. The only thing that we then have to think about is how do we solve the week problem, because I think also what would be nice is if every month started on the same day of the week and ended on the same day of the week, or if at least every year started and ended on the same day of the week. That would be nice. There are ways to do that, but that also just improves the calendar. And I'll get to that in a second because we're about to talk about Mars. But yeah, in all likelihood, again, just as I said that there is no way we will be implementing base 6 or base 12 unless it is some separatist group that goes to Alpha Centauri, right? And that mission, they're we're gonna use base 6 instead, and damn the expense, right? So it's really, there's a lot of inertia in society.
It seems the Rebel Alliance have created their own calendar.
Yeah, because to change a base system would mean changing every book ever written, every website, everything. To change a base system would be very difficult. But changing a calendar wouldn't be as difficult because past dates would still be past dates. You could say, August 31st, 2012 would still be August 31st, 2012. It wouldn't change just because now there is no such thing as August 31st, 2112. If in 2112 they adopt this lunisolar calendar, it would be different. So I think this has greater potential to occur, but is still incredibly unlikely because people hold to their customs. And also what happens here is pretty interesting is that if you have 12 months that are 29 and a half days long on average, that will give you a year length of 354 days, but 13 months will give you 383 days. Neither is acceptable and would get off track very quickly, but that allows you to have an entire leap month about every other year. So whenever necessary, you just add the leap month. And
Jacob, we have a 2-hour delay. I don't know if you just saw the email that came in.
Yeah, And oh, what?
What's up?
This class schedule is.
Oh, I'm sure it's janked.
It's,
Maybe
it's
our principal
janked.
needs to watch this to learn how to like organize stuff around a calendar
Yes.
in a proper manner.
Ayo, I'm not gonna say the name to further dox us, but
Yep.
Ayo principal, Ayo superintendent. Listen here.
Yeah.
Is Madame Palmer still there? Or
Madame
is she
Palmer
long
has
gone?
stepped down. She has left office. There is
Oh,
now a
boy.
new evil upon us.
Wonderful.
Enter the final order.
Yes, that's just what I was thinking. Oh my god. But anyways,
so
on
what do you guys
to-
think about this?
Oh,
Just
sorry.
quickly, just
All right.
about Luna. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I do
Anyone
like
can-
I do like the idea of just being months being determined by the moon because it's so close. Anyways, I'm like for the loony solar.
Yeah, because like that's the point.
I think
you
it's-
know? That's the
Yeah.
point of having
Mm.
months.
I think it's probably better. I don't think it'll be adopted. I
Mhm.
think more likely time for adopting a new calendar is the first extra solar system
Hmm.
or interstellar.
Yeah, the
travel.
first Interstellar.
Mm.
And
That's fair.
well,
That's
I
a-
think
that's a very
whenever they
good point.
adopt a new calendar, they should just go back to year 0.
Yeah.
Because
That's
if you
fair.
have like 2112 and there's no such thing as August 31st, it works, but it's a bit more confusing. But if you just say, okay, August 31st is however many new days before year 0, then I
Yeah.
think that for like new studiers of history, they'll be able to comprehend that better.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, oh, this event happened in the solar system, like in blank BC, right?
Mhm.
Or before a colony,
Yeah.
before habitation, something like that. But
For colonial era.
yeah, BCE. There you go. So yeah, all interesting points. You'll probably just stick to the Gregorian calendar, which keeps me up at night. My greatest enemy, the Gregorian calendar.
Ah, my oldest enemy.
Pope
The-
Gregory, I shall defeat Pope Gregory in combat.
If ever there needed to be fan art of this show,
Mhm.
it needs to be you 1v1ing Pope Gregory.
Pope Gregory.
And in
Anyway.
this week's episode of the Gravity Max live stream, Max kills the Pope.
Yes. We take on the Catholic Church. Anyway, so next
I'm pretty sure that's inevitably what we do every episode. But moving on to Mars.
in a much less explicit way. Moving on to Mars. So they have a year length that is 668.6 sols, or local days, whatever you want to call them. They are popularly called sols, SOLS, like in The Martian, they call it that. And actually NASA, like if you look up, say, the InSight mission, which is a like lander on Mars, they say Sol 1376 or something of the mission. Like they count the mission in terms of sols. That is their word for day. But anyway, so 668 Martian sols in a year. So there is actually, because everyone loves Mars, someone actually came up with a Martian calendar already, and that is called the Darien calendar, and that is the first option here. So what the Darien calendar looks like is you have 24 months in the year, and 5 months are 28 days long, and then the 6th month is 27 days long. So, yeah, and then at the end of the year, you have a leap day sometimes. And that is interesting because, here, wait, I want to confirm, I want to be sure about just one little thing I said that I'm not entirely sure about. Let me check. Yes, okay, I was right. So it's every 6th month is 1 day shorter, but all the other months are normal. And so this is very nice. It is very nearly what I like, because 28-day months, like February, will start on one day of the week and end on another day of the week, but then the next month will start on the same day of the week. It is very wonderful. So the Darien calendar, you could have the first month of the year starts on a Sunday and ends on a Saturday. So then the second month starts on a Sunday and ends on a Saturday. And the reason that this is just so important, you think like, why does that really matter? But again, this is just ease of day-to-day life. So it is February 7th. It is a Sunday, right? If we knew for a fact, if every month was 28 days long, and every month started on on a Monday, as this month started, then every 7th of the month would be a Sunday, and every 14th, and every 21st. And eventually, by living in this system for long enough, you would just begin to know it innately. So if you could say, oh, meet me next Thursday, you would automatically know, oh, okay, that is the whatever, say the 13th. I don't know. It's not the 13th this month. Not this month, but you could say, meet me next Thursday. Oh, okay, the 13th. Or alternatively, they could say, meet me on the 13th. Like, does the 13th work for you? You could say, well, that's a Thursday, and I know that on Thursdays I have this, this, and this, so no. Or yes. And I think that would very greatly improve things. But the one flaw, the one fatal flaw of the Darien calendar is that every 6th month is only 27 days long. So then the start of the next month is one day earlier. So it shifts slowly throughout the year, which is just very sad, because it isn't perfect. I strive for perfection. And so every 6 months, you'll have to readjust your entire mental framework, which is just unacceptable. So below, I have an alternate Darien calendar in which you have 24 months, and every month is 28 days long. But then the last month is either 21 or 28 days long, and roughly 50-50. Like half of the time it'll be 21 days long, half of the time it'll be 28. Sols long. And this essentially involves the creation of the leap week instead of a leap day. So, and that is just as needed. It would be roughly half of the time. So every even year would have a leap week. Every odd year would not have a leap week. And then, of course, sometimes you would have to add leap weeks here and there. But the point is, that would keep things perfectly standardized. Every month could start on a Monday, and you would know, or a Sunday, depending on if Americans or Europeans get there first. So that would just be very nice. That would be a perfect world. It would be so beautiful, don't you think? Like, you would just...
What a wonderful world.
Yeah, exactly. It would be great, because the last month of the year would be occasionally cut short by 1 week, which is like, fine. It keeps things steady. It keeps things like, you'll know exactly that the 18th of every month is always a Tuesday or whatever, which is just wonderful.
The power of the sun in the palm of my hand.
Exactly. And so I just like it. I like it. So I prefer the second one. Which do you guys think will happen? Because here on Mars is just a very interesting place, because they can't just copy the Earth calendar, just as Mars really can't just copy the Earth clock. An option 0 on Mars would just like really bad, like people would hate it. I would say the same thing applies to the Martian calendar, because Mars actually has very, very pronounced seasons. And that isn't because it has such a high axial tilt. It's actually because Mars has very significant differences in the distance away it is from the sun. It has a very eccentric orbit relative to the other planets, so Mars actually gets much closer to the sun at certain times of years than other times of year. And so the effect of that is that seasons are an actual thing on Mars. So you have to have a calendar that matches the local year. So yeah, what do you guys think about that? What sort of Martian calendars do you think would get adopted?
Yeah, I think the you know, like the ones that we were looking at, all that stuff, like while we were making that with all of those, and like the one that we were looking at had all those like other month names, you know, like it had all the interesting names for the month. So I don't think all those names are gonna pan out, unfortunately.
Not necessarily those names. Those names are specifically like, I think it's like the Indian zodiac for each month.
But
so
I still think
it's 24 instead of 12. It's like they doubled it.
Yeah.
So they've got like Rishaba or whatever is like the equivalent of Taurus, and so that's like your second April. But
yeah, and I think that concept is pretty close to what it's gonna end up being. Yeah, out of these, I would prefer the second one, I would say.
Yes, converting people.
Oh,
what do you think, Jacob?
Become a monster.
The second's probably better in the same, like, I'm just thinking about,
like, would it actually happen? Like,
be unset. If you have a minor change, that's just unsettling. If you have a major change, people can adapt to that.
That's true. That is true. I think there's a name of that principle, and if it isn't, that's gonna be named the Friedman principle.
Like if someone like changed the paint color of my room by like a tiny shade, that would give me a headache. But if someone changed it to blue, I just feel like, oh, interesting, and move on.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's very true.
So do you think the second one would occur, or the second calendar?
Yeah, I think the second one's probably the better of the two. If the first one's already kind of like established and planned out, though, it might just get it as because status quo, establishment.
That's true.
Plan.
Yeah, because the first one already has been proposed. That is the Darien calendar. So now I guess this is the second one is the Rudinian calendar, and the Darien calendar has much more clout. I think it was like proposed in like 1980 something, so it has a head start on the second one. And it's in the popular, like, it's in the psyche, it's in the zeitgeist, right? So people already know of that one, and they will already know about that one once they get to Mars, whereas they probably won't know about mine. And I say mine, but this would probably be independently developed by many other people. But you'd probably get, say, the first colony of 100 people, and like 95 of them would be like, oh yeah, I've heard of the Darien calendar, that sounds reasonable. And then 5 of them would be like, wait, but what about this system is so much better. And they'll be like, whatever. Because again, as you said, like, just appealing to tradition, like I feel like people are used to leap days, but they're not used to leap weeks. So people would be like, oh, that leap week thing is terrible. Also, people are used to months starting on different days in the Gregorian calendar, so people don't care. Like, people don't know that they want months to start on the same day every month, you know? So they wouldn't really think about that. So a lot of them would probably just go with the original Darien calendar because it's like, oh, it makes sense. You've got leap days, you've got months that start at random days, which is familiar to me, so yeah.
And the 27-day month would just be their equivalent to, like, February.
Pretty much, yeah.
So that minor change, people will like be more readily accepting of it.
Yeah, exactly. I think, unfortunately, although it saddens me to say, I think the Darien calendar will be the one that is picked. Although it is a vast improvement on the Gregorian calendar already, because at least instead of having like 31 or 30 or 28 days, it's either 28 or 27. And as, again, another thing that it's better than the Gregorian calendar in is that at least, 6 months in a row will start on the same day. So at least, you've got a set of parameters. The shift is slower, whereas right now it's very random. Like if I were to ask you, what day of the week is March 13th this year going to be on in just a month and a week? March 13th or March 1st. What day is March 1st going to be on? Like, that's
it's a
just,
Thursday.
You have to think about it for a moment.
I know it's a Thursday.
What, March 13th or March 1st?
March 1st is a Thursday.
March 1st is actually a Monday.
God!
And March 13th, I know this one is a Saturday because I'm taking the SAT on March 13th. But,
pain.
Yeah, pain, right? And the way I know
I
March
had a
1st,
1 in 7
Yep. You had a 1 in 7 chance. The way I know March 1st, though, is that I know that February 1st was a Monday, and February is 28 days long, so that March 1st will also be a Monday. See how nice that is? See how simple that is? We can also know that March 7th is going to be a Sunday. That is the benefit of doing the Rudinian calendar.
Wow.
But alas, my pleas fall on deaf ears, I feel.
They booed him because he was right.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever will happen, for better or for worse. But yeah, I think we've covered Mars.
Yeah.
So now we've got the Jovian System. Okay, so here it gets a bit more complicated. So out in the Jovian System, 1 year is 12 years long, which is no way to live. That is no way to live.
If you die on Jupiter, you die in real life.
Yeah, if you die on Jupiter, you die in real life. But just think about a 12-year-long year. If we had that on Earth, you would have 144 months. So you would have 144 different month names to remember. So you'd have like January, 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 and then eventually you'd get to February, February, Jebuary, like just...
Jebuary, you say?
Oh, no, I do not say. I retract it. Someone's got to make that a meme. Jebuary.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, the one of him.
538 electoral college votes.
All for Jeb.
All for Jeb. But my point is, that is sort of dysfunctional. So Jupiter will probably not follow a 12-year-long year. And so then the question is, what would they do instead? And they could either follow the length of an Earth year or a Mars year. And as I am a Mars favoritist here, I think they will follow a Mars year. And here's the reason for that. So again, Mars is like Constantinople. It is at the key position to be a huge trading hub between the outer system and the inner system. So that being said, Jupiter is probably going to be doing a lot more trade with Mars than with Earth. And so the result of that is going to be that the Jovian colonists might choose a Martian calendar, to follow the Martian calendar. Although when I think about it, they could just as likely follow Earth. It really depends on stages of development. If you've got like 1 billion people on Mars, and then they send the first people to Jupiter, or well, they're gonna, go there, plant a flag, have some outposts. But if Mars gets up to like 1 billion people, or just a lot of people, significantly before Jupiter has a population explosion, then it's more likely they adopt a Martian year length. But if the Jovian and Martian systems have population growth in tandem, it's more likely they'll follow the Terran year. And so when I say the Jovian system would follow the Martian year, that does not mean that they would follow the Martian calendar. So they would not do the Darien 24 months and 28 days in a month. And the reason for that is that the Jovian system has shorter days. If we remember, they have just different day lengths, about 21 and a half hours long. So if they were to have 668 local days in a year, which we've called Joves, we've called them Joves, if you have 668 Joves in a year, that will be significantly less than the length of a Martian year. So to follow the Martian year, they need to have about 775 Joves in a year. And that works out to a system where you have 24 months, and each month is 32 days long. Oh, and this is an interesting little thing. In the outer worlds, or at least in the Jovian system, I predict that they will adopt an 8-day week. And so this is another question I have, for you guys to ponder, is that, and the reason for this is that if you divide, as we said, dividing the day on Ganymede into 8 equal segments, dividing the day on Europa into 4 equal segments, and Io into 2 equal segments, that is very conducive to an 8-day week. because if you're on Ganymede with an 8-day week, then every Sunday the sun will rise or set. And it depends on where you are on the planet. But it'll be the same day each week, which I think is very valuable, and they would appreciate that. So they might switch to an 8-day week instead of 7-day week. And if they do that, and if they have 4 weeks in a month exactly, then you get 32 days in a month, and then 24 months in a year. And that comes out to 24 times 32 is 768, which falls a little bit short of the 775 Joves. But the way you could do that is by adding 1 or 2 weeks to the end of the last month of the year, just as in the Rudinian variant of the Darian calendar, how you would have the last month of the year just be cut short sometimes. You could do the same thing, except slightly lengthen it for the Jovian calendar. So what do you guys think about that first proposal?
Makes sense.
I like it. Oh, Max, you've gone into the ethereal realm. Oh, you're back.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, you're good.
Window washing.
Yes. I like
it's like video compression artifacts or something like that. So I just sort of do this and then it goes away. But anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, what do you think, Seb?
I like it. That? Like it a lot. Think we should implement it today.
Yeah, today. Yes. I wonder, do you think people would accept the 8-day week? That's just something.
If you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him read a calendar. So goes the old adage.
True. It really depends on if 8-day week means 5-day work week and 3-day weekend every single week, or if it means 6-day work week every week. I think that will be the determining factor.
If it was 8 days, I would advocate for wait, no, never mind.
Okay. I think it would be interesting. I bet by the time that we get out to the Jovian system, that enough work could be automated that you could shorten the work week to 5 out of 8 instead of 5 out of 7.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Although that's just really, because you need a lot of automation if you're going to be out there. And because a lot of work is going to be automated, because it's just mining, essentially. It's just a ton of mining. So, people just need to install some mods, auto quarry mods, and Minecraft. But that's it. So yeah, so they might do an 8-day week. That would be interesting for the outer worlds. The outer worlds might have a standard of an 8-day week. And another thing that's really interesting about that is that since the Jovian day is shorter than the Martian day, 8 Jovian days is roughly equivalent to 7 Martian days, which means that if you have an 8-day Jovian week, that stays roughly synced with the 7-day Martian week. And if you have all this trade going on, you will, with the fiscal year, again, because these two worlds will have the same year length under this system, you'd have fiscal years that match up. So if you have an interplanetary company, it'll be very easy for them in terms of bookkeeping because the years will be synced. And so whenever you need a leap week to stay as long as the Martian year, you'll just do it in the Jovian system. And so the result of that would be, Martian year 22 will also be Jovian year 22. And so all the companies can be like, all right, very simple and easy. We have our tallies and books very kept well, and it's just nice, and everyone's happy.
Yes.
But yeah. So then alternatively, if the Jovian system has a more independent streak, what they could do is go with a year length that is 1/4 as long as the Jovian year, which is roughly 3 Earth years, and that would correspond to precisely 1 season of the Jovian year. So year 1 is winter, year 2 is spring, year 3 is summer, year 4 is fall. for the entire year, which is just fascinating. And that would be a slightly longer year. That would be 1,224 Joves long. And here we said you would need 36 months, and those months would be 32 or 40 days long. Again, I am a sucker for integer number of weeks in a month. So instead of doing like 35 or 34, days in a month, depending, it's 32 or 40 and nowhere in between. And then, of course, you need your leap weeks. I think it's to get up to 1224, it's approximately every other month. So all of your odd months will have 32 days, and all of your even months will have 40 days, and every once in a while there will be a leap week. And that's just that. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I like it. I would say...
I prefer the first one, just for the sake of interplanetary trade and bookkeeping, and the fact that, I don't know, Mars fanboy here, so I see Mars in a favorable position, and this helps Mars get into a favorable position. But also in that, out in the outer worlds, the year is just too long to think about. That is my hypothesis. And it doesn't really matter for the Galilean worlds, because, again, they have no atmosphere. So it's like, oh, the ammonia ice is a few degrees warmer this year. Interesting, whatever. Right?
Yeah.
Whereas Titan, I would say, is the one world in the outer worlds where seasons actually do matter, except out there on Saturn, the year is 30 years long. So each season is 8 years long. So these are more that is just untenable. There is no way that you would make a year based off of that. So you would just have to sort of keep track of that. That would be sort of each decade essentially would have its own character, its own seasonal character. So you would be like, the 60s, one of the summer decades, which is just a weird thing to think about. A decade that was constantly summer, the 60s, 2160s or whatever. So that would be that, but we're not there yet. So what do you guys think, I guess, in conclusion, before we move on to the Saturnian system? Any other comments?
No.
All right. Yeah, all right. So we can go. I've been talking for a while.
Yeah, I didn't expect this one to run so long. But the next sections are going to go very fast.
They'll go quicker. But there's a lot of little technicalities. Oh, and if you guys have to go watch the Super Bowl, you guys can, of course, come back and rewatch this later, as always. Yeah. So.
Also, Jacob, if you need to leave for dinner or anything, do not feel obligated to stay till the end of this. But yeah.
I might take 20 minutes.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. All right.
I'll just I'll connect back in 20, 30 minutes or something.
Okay, cool.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll see you in a bit.
Bye, guys.
See you.
Okay. All right.
Oh, no.
So, I'm
oh, no.
I'm in this frame now. I'm in this frame, right? That's what's going on right now?
Yeah, you are. You're kind of split in half.
Well, now I am not split in half, right? I'm entirely in one frame.
Well, I'm shifting you through different dimensions, so
I'm going through the
sit like a human, real quick.
I apologize. Anyway, so the Saturnian system, we have Titan and Saturn, and again, since the day length is roughly similar to the Jovian system's day lengths, we figure that they might as well follow the Martian calendar as well. And so the way that they would do that is with 775 local days, which we have called Crons here for Kronos, the mad Titan who, wait, I want to put the picture in.
Mm-hmm.
I want to put the, oh wait, I can't copy it, right? Oh wait, here we go, copy image, okay. Okay, present again. This is the picture that YouTube should use when they demonetize your account. This is, of course, a parody of the art style that is ever more prevalent in like YouTube and Google like terms of service updates, they always use this art style. This should be their like, I'm sorry, your video has been demonetized. That should be the picture accompanied with it. Anyway, that is Kronos, the Mad Titan. But the calendar in the Saturnian system would look almost identical to the one in the Jovian system if it were to adopt a year length the same as a Martian year, which of course, Martian favoritist here, I think is incredibly likely, and I hope that happens. And so what you end up with is, 24 months in a year, each month being 32 days long, and of course 8-day weeks. And then at the end of the year, you need to add a couple leap weeks just here and there, depending. So then the alternative system, which is a more Saturnian native system, would operate on 1,012 crons, and that gives you a year length that is precisely 1/12 as long as the actual Saturnian year, which could be nice. And again, it would be nice for Titan because then you could think of things in terms of 3. So you're like, okay, every 3 years we move on to the next season. That also works well with a base 6 or a base 12 counting system. Just gonna put that out there.
Man.
Just put that on the table. And so the way we divided this was into 32 months, each month being 32 days long, and then plus 1 or minus 1 or 2 leap weeks. So you would have to cut short the last month, just like in the Rudinian variant of the Darien calendar. So yeah, that's. I mean, there's not much more to say.
Mm-hmm.
That's just that. So now let's go to the Uranian system. We decided not to come up with the name for the day. I said Urans.
Yeah, but no, it doesn't deserve.
It doesn't sound good. It doesn't deserve it. It doesn't deserve it because it can't be nice. It has to be 17 hours long. So it gets just days. So we'll just say local days. That's what we're going to call them. So again, following the Martian calendar length, this is just same old, same old. This is just kind of rehashing the same thing over and over again, but that's simply because all of the outer worlds are likely to adopt a similar day length. And because of doing that, if they all adopt the same Martian year length for the sake of bookkeeping, and at this point, this wouldn't even be known as the Martian year length. That would be more like a trivial fact about this year length. This would be the, outer world standard. This would be part of just, this would be like the outer solar system standard. And people would be like, oh yes, which happens to be 1 Martian year. But yeah, so 24 months in a year, 32 days in a month, 8-day weeks, plus 1 or 2 leap weeks. And we didn't even offer a native Uranian variant. And the reason for that is that the Uranian year is 84 Earth years long. So there is no useful division to occur here, because if you were, I would say the maximum useful year length is about 3 Earth years. Beyond that, it's like there are too many months to remember, essentially. And it's just like, you might as well split these into different years. And so, 84 divided by 3 means that you need to divide the Uranian year into at least 28 segments to get something workable. So maybe you divide it into 30 segments or 32, but it's like, at this point, it's like, why are we even bothering to follow the cycle of the seasons here on Uranus? Although they are much more pronounced on Uranus because of the extreme axial tilt, it's just too long a period to really sync up to anything, So.
Yeah.
So it is what it is.
It is what it is.
So they just follow the outer world standard. So then we get to Neptune, the Neptunian system. And again, Neptune here is our sort of oddball. Of course, there is probably a way that you could configure things to follow the outer world standard, but just for the sake of thinking differently with Neptune, is just that Neptune, it might be the interstellar thing, whatever is going on. But here we are assuming that they also follow the Martian year length, except, of course, their days are longer. So to follow the Martian year length on Neptune, you would have about 702 local days, or trites. And so we would divide those trites, so like we're thinking, into 18 months, and each of those months would have 36 or 42 days in them. And the reason for doing that would be to have 6-day weeks, which, again, just like the 8-day weeks, it's like, would people adopt this? Wouldn't they adopt this? I would say people would adopt this if it meant 4-day work week, 2-day weekend, and they would not adopt this if this meant 5-day work week, 1-day weekend. But, or it could just be the opposite, because the industrialists would want 5-day work week, 1-day weekend. And the industrialists tend to be very good at molding public opinion. So, but yeah, so you have 18 months here. And I think it's, again, roughly 50-50 that half of them are 42 days long and half of them are 36. But let me just make sure that 9 times 36 plus 9 times 42. Yeah, that gives you 702 trites. And then occasionally you would probably need a leap week. And again, that is standard fare at this point. We've talked about that. So yeah, that's it. So we're sort of predicting, essentially what we're predicting here are two standards, the Terran year standard and the Martian year standard. And the Martian year standard would be used on every planet farther out than Mars, and the Terran year standard would be used on every planet further inward than Earth. And that could include the sun itself, of course, with a Dyson sphere. We didn't really talk about Dyson spheres, but essentially what happens in space applies to the Dyson sphere. So let's go to the space category. So with the outer worlds, while we discussed what I think of as more likely, which is the Martian year-length standard, you could also end up with a Jovian year-length standard, because if the Jovian colonists, when they colonize Jupiter, decide to break away from the Martian calendar and make their own Jovian standard, then again, I see it as more likely that the worlds beyond that adopt the Jovian standard instead of each making their own. Of course, that is up to them. Maybe it stops, the bus stops at the Saturnian system, and once they get to the Saturnian system, all the other worlds will follow the Saturnian system. Again, it's really up to the colonists, and we don't know. I just think of standardization and multiplanetary unity. I think of that as more likely than individualistic type of things, just because it makes trade so much easier. But it really depends, because the solar system might be a lot less interconnected than I'm predicting. Because, again, we have to think of just how much does it cost to travel? Because while it is possible that we could colonize the solar system without inventing nuclear fusion, it would be incredibly slow going. It would take many years to get from planet to planet. And if it takes many years to get from planet to planet, who cares what the calendar is or what the time is on that other planet? You know what I mean? It's like, if it takes you 7 years to get from Mars to Neptune, are people really going to be thinking about standardization? But if you have nuclear fusion, that very much speeds things up. Or if you have a Dyson sphere, that also speeds things up, because you can essentially use light sails to go very fast. The only limit with nuclear fusion and light sails, well, with nuclear fusion, you do have a limit of how much fuel you can carry, just like conventional rocket fuel, although that limit is much higher. But with light sails, you can just go. And it's like having a sailboat, because you're not carrying any fuel with you, which is just very wonderful. So that can be much quicker. The only limit for that kind of thing is what the human body can tolerate in terms of acceleration. And we'll get to the travel times in a bit. But for space in general, they could either copy Earth, they could copy Mars or Jupiter or whatever becomes the outer world standard, or they could forge their own. And that forging their own would essentially be what we talked about earlier with the Stardate system. And the Stardate system we talked about the clocks side of it, but again, I also mentioned that it goes up to 36 months in a year or 6 months in a year, and blah blah. So yeah, now we can go to holidays. But first, I gotta go take a bathroom break because we've been going for been going for almost 3 hours. So we'll be back in a few minutes.
All right, and welcome back to the 128 seconds live stream. Yeah, pretty good one so far. I guess because no one's around, I'll self-plug. I didn't mention this at the start of the episode of the plugs, but I've just started a new series on my channel called In Greater Detail. I almost forgot the name there. I was going in between In Greater Detail and In Greater Depth, but I went with In Greater Detail. Those are long-form live streams, a little like this one, but I usually keep them, I'm planning to keep them to about an hour, where I go in depth about topics that I have covered previously, because in my videos, I provide you with a broad overview of whatever topic. So now with these live streams, I'm going more in depth, and I am trying to capture more detail. And he's back.
And back. All right, so what are we on now? Now we're on holidays.
Yes.
This is just for fun. This is the funnest part. So this is our little, what is it? It's a break, a mental break, I guess you could say. So we'll talk about what holidays might develop on these worlds, because they have their own calendars. So what sort of holidays might they celebrate? And these are just some ideas. So,
on Venus, there is Venusian Independence Day with the annual jazz festival. This is a picture from the Venusian Independence Day annual jazz festival, with a well-known Venusian jazz went double-time platinum pop star, giving us his jazz demonstration. I would definitely recommend listening to his albums. Very nice, very good stuff. Venus is one of the most culturally diverse places in the solar system if you're talking about music, and there's no greater show of that than on Venusian Independence Day.
Yep.
Next up,
all right,
we have Luna with Armstrong Day on July 20th,
yes,
in remembrance of Neil Armstrong's first steps on the moon. We, I guess, loons now have an annual reenactment where it is a planet-wide global, or would you call it a globe? It's a moon.
Yeah, I guess it's a globe.
I guess.
As long as it's spherical. It
is a global celebration where only one is chosen to play the part of famous Terran Neil Armstrong.
Yep.
It's the highest honor.
Yep. And they go off to the location where the original moon landing occurred, probably a few feet away, because, like a few 100 feet away, because I imagine the actual site would end up having like a glass dome over it and would be like a museum. The original landing site, because it's still there. It's still there,
yeah.
And the footsteps are still there, and the plaque is still there. The plaque that says, like, here man first stepped on the moon, 1969. And of course, there are 6 of those around the moon for the 6 different lunar missions. So you could have reenactments all over the globe.
Yes.
Each town would probably have its own local reenactment too, but only the true reenactments. It would probably be a global competition. How do you think they would decide the reenactors? Because you've also got Buzz Aldrin, so it would be a group of two people.
It's true. It would probably be the top actors at that point in time, the top loon actors, or it would be some kind of contest, or something else, but they would figure it out somehow.
Yeah. It could be like an sort of essay thing for high schoolers.
Yes.
Where it's like the two people with the best essays in the entire moon.
Yeah.
So, interesting things.
Next up, we have Mars with Musk Appreciation Day, which is complimentary. Yeah.
Yep. You've got annual Astro Renaissance Fair. So on Musk Appreciation Day, people go around with their not a flamethrowers and just burn the things.
Yes.
As well as they have some fun. They shake the maracas.
The maracas.
I love this picture because it's everyone else here is very awkward except for Elon Musk and the mariachi band, which is just it's so funny. I just find it hilarious.
And
anyway,
the summer solstice celebration with the annual polar
plunge, because on the hottest day of the year on Mars, of course, it is still incredibly freezing. So maybe people will have a challenge. Of course, not exactly similar to this picture. Those people would be dead, but maybe they could have something where it's like the challenge is, can you go outside in an unheated spacesuit for 15 minutes? Because the atmosphere is too thin, but you still get your like spacesuit. So it's like, oh, you're like freezing out there, and you're like, I have to. Whoever stays out there the longest wins.
Yeah.
And that is the polar plunge for charity every summer solstice celebration. And yeah, the Astro Renaissance Fair just celebrates sort of this time period, essentially, or the time period roughly 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Like how we have Renaissance fairs where we think of medieval, like England and knights and stuff. People would think of this time period as like a rebirth of space travel. So,
yeah,
that's the point.
Next up, the moon's Jupiter. Io Pi Day.
So, with annual deep dish pizza eating competition. So this is just a follow-up on the joke that Io is like Chicago. You're not a fan, of course, of deep dish pizza.
I'm not a fan of deep dish pizza.
Yeah. How many deep dish pizzas, if there were $1 million on the line, Sebastian, how many deep dish pizzas could you eat in 1 hour?
0.
Of course. What if $1 billion were on the line, Sebastian? How many deep dish pizzas could you eat then?
There comes every point in a man's life where he has to decide between just accruation of wealth or the content of his character. I don't know what I would do if presented $1 billion to eat as many deep dish pizzas as I could. I shiver if that day should ever come.
Yeah, don't sell out to the deep dish pizzas.
And then there's Hydro Day on Europa with the annual water tasting ceremony.
Schlorp that European water.
And
I love that picture. That is just a great picture. That looks like a picture they'd use for an Onion article.
Honestly, yeah.
But yeah, next we've got Planetary Awareness Month on Ganymede with the annual Ganymede Marathon, where you run around the entire circumference of Ganymede, which would probably take you a month, if not more, because Ganymede is very large. Ganymede is in fact larger than Mercury, and so I imagine that on Ganymede they would have a campaign where they want to change the definition of a planet that would include them, because they're bigger than Mercury. They deserve planethood. Or if they don't deserve planethood, then neither does Mercury. They're very vindictive about Mercury. So they have Planetary Awareness Month with the annual Ganymede Marathon, where people run around all of Ganymede, and it takes them a month just to show how much of a planet it is, because it is so large.
Yeah.
Will they ever get the IAU to change their standards? Only time will tell.
And then Ice Duck Day.
Then we've got Ice Duck Day with annual platypus climate prediction. So,
similar
of course,
to
this creature,
Groundhog Day.
Yeah, similar to Groundhog's Day. This creature, they call it an ice duck on Callisto because it wanders over the icy surface of Callisto, and I don't know, bores hole. I don't know what platypuses normally do, so they do something.
Using
even know
using normal and platypus in the same sentence
Yeah.
is probably not a good idea.
Well, but here's what I posit you. Do you know what a groundhog does? Like, what is a groundhog? I only have like an idea of what a groundhog is because I watched the movie Groundhog's Day, like on Tuesday. So
Yeah, I don't know.
like what is it? Like, is it like a badger, or does it look more like a like what kind of thing is it? Like, it's just anyway. That's the same thing with the platypus. Although the platypus, we know what it looks like because it's so distinctive. But this platypus is predicting 60 more Joves of winter. So it saw its shadow. Saw its shadow in the dim light of the Jovian sun.
Next up, Saturn.
Saturn. Floating Fridays. This is a Titanian holiday. And this is with weekly wingsuit flights. So every Friday, the people of Titan don their wingsuits and flap their wings and then fly through the air on Titan. And this is due to the fact that we talked about this last time, that Titan has a gravitational acceleration that is roughly the same as the moon, so around 15% of that of the Earth. So already you can jump very high and bounce. But also Titan, unlike all the other moons, which is why Titan is the best moon, as this is my campaign, Titan is the best moon, and that is because it has an atmosphere, and its atmosphere is actually thicker than the atmosphere on Earth, which is crazy. It's 1.5 times the pressure, the atmospheric pressure, which means that you could fly very easily. You could actually fly on Titan, and I imagine people would very much want to take advantage of this fact, that human-powered flight. Imagine. We can only dream. So next we have the Glaciator World Championships on Enceladus with the annual glacing competition. So glacing is their word for ice skating, much like the Callistans have the ice duck. Enceladans have the glacing. And this activity occurs on, this is a free-form activity, so there is no stadium. This is on the surface, the icy surface of Enceladus. And so the challenge is who can make the most impressive. Hello, Jacob. I'm now in the shadow realm, aren't I, Sebastian?
Oh, no. No, it cannot be.
On-stream editing. But yeah, so... Oh, we are on the slide for Saturnian holidays.
Saturnian holidays.
Yeah.
Okay,
so,
I see.
Yeah, so we're on the Glaciator World Championships, which is a holiday on the moon Enceladus, which is a very icy moon. And so, yeah, that's the holidays. Then next, and also, again, Titan is the only major moon of Saturn, but this is a major minor moon. But continued, can you go to the next slide, Sebastian?
Yeah, sure. Jacob,
Okay.
are you going to turn your camera on? You don't need to. You don't want to.
Yes.
All right, we will have that
There.
Oh no. Oh crap!
Right.
I have to click back into it because I need to click back into Discord. All right, hold on, everyone.
Yep. I'm just preparing to say it. Tell me when it's presenting the slide.
Okay, and all right, so you can calm down and you can stay there and you can. Oh my god! All right, and then you can come here, and then you've switched places.
Beautiful.
Oh no! All right, well you're going down there. You're coming over here, and you're gonna come over here, and I'm gonna shrink you, and now you're over there, and now you're over here, and you are this big.
Bro, where am I?
What is going on?
And we are back.
Okay, go to the next slide. Go to Saturn continued.
We're here.
Okay, so this is a celebration on Saturn's moon Mimas, which is a moon that very much resembles the Death Star, if you've seen a picture of it. So they would celebrate Star Wars Day on May the 4th with an annual pilgrimage to Herschel Crater. Herschel Crater being the prominent crater on the surface of Mimas that makes it look like the Death Star. Jacob, do you know what? Have you seen Mimas? I should show you what Mimas looks like.
I've seen the images, and
yeah,
I think that the best part about this is that you could do all those Jedi flips.
Yes.
Oh yes, because it is a moon with very low gravity. Yeah, that's true.
You could even have I mean, jetpacks for Earth gravity have probably been invented by this point, but you could have like really low powered like Mandalorian jetpacks and have someone play Boba Fett that way.
Very true.
It would work without all the complexities of Earth gravity jetpacks.
Yeah, that is similar to the wingsuits on Titan, which we talked about just before you got back, which is Titan has about the same gravity of the moon, but an atmosphere that is 1.5 times as thick as Earth's atmosphere. So you could probably just flap your wings if you had a wingsuit and engage in human-powered flight. And that is a weekly activity on Titan. But yeah, so Star Wars Day for Mimas. So everyone goes to that one crater and celebrates Star Wars Day once a year. So then we got Uranus, and they have Shakespearean Theater Week with annual performances by the Uranian troupe. I don't know, what would they call it? The Uranian...
I don't know.
The Uranian ammonia ices. I don't know. They'll probably think of something. But this is due to the fact
that...
The
Uranian Theater Institution, or UTI for short.
I think they might want a different name. But so all of the Uranian moons are named after characters from Shakespeare, except for one of them, which is named after a character from an Alexander Pope poem. So that is why you have Shakespearean Theater Week. They would also have probably a holiday at another point in the year, which would be Alexander Pope Day. So, and then we get to
before we move from Uranus, all I have to say about having a holiday that's like Theater Week, humanity's come full circle. We've brought back the festival of Dionysus.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yes, we have.
Wonderful. So next we get to Neptune. And so Neptune itself would have the storm diving rite of passage. So this is, at the age of 16, all Neptunians must engage in the sky diving through the Great Dark Spot, which is a storm of similar magnitude to the Great Red Spot on Jupiter. And all of the Neptunian children that return are welcomed into Neptunian society, and all that do not are dishonorably remembered. They are dishonorably purged from the records. Yes, Neptune is a very, very intense environment, a very hostile place.
Is this just Mandalore?
A little bit.
Yes, pretty much. So it's the storm diving rite of passage. But then the other one, which I think is much nicer, is the Kuiper Belt Culture Festival on the moon Triton with annual food and music. So here, the Kuiper Belt Culture Festival, again, look how dark it is, because, it is very dark on Triton. So this picture is of daytime on Triton. And so here, they got these nice lanterns. I don't know what they're called. I called them, what did I call them? I call them like Chinese lanterns, because I don't know what they're called.
Yeah.
I said that to Sebastian when we were working on this episode. I was like, look at the Chinese lanterns, but I do not know what they're called. Aren't they like, I just do not know. I have no idea what they're called. So these lantern things, very beautiful. And This is because Triton is thought to be an actual object from the Kuiper Belt, like Pluto or Eris or Haumea or Makemake, that got captured by Neptune and became a moon of Neptune. And this is because Triton is actually rotating, or it's orbiting Neptune backwards. It's going the wrong way around Neptune. So people think that it probably formed in the Kuiper Belt and was captured. So, of course, they would have a very close relationship with other Kuiper Belt objects like Pluto and Eris, the ones I just said. So also because of their location, right? Neptune is the gateway to interstellar travel, but it's also the gateway to the Kuiper Belt. And because of that, Triton would be very intimate with the other Kuiper Belt objects. So they would have this cultural appreciation festival. So yeah. All right, next, we've got gravities. So this is just a brief little foray into just the different gravities humanity might have to endure. So we begin. Hypergravity, which is greater than 1.2 Gs, which is 1.2 times Earth gravity. And this can be vastly greater than 1.2 Gs. Jupiter has 2.5 Gs surface gravity, and the sun has 20. But of course, people probably wouldn't live on the sun. They would live in orbit of the sun, even on a Dyson sphere. This is why a Dyson sphere would be impractical, like an actual sphere, because why would people live on the surface of something like that? It's really just being in orbit of the sun. But anyway, so this is 20% greater than Earth gravity, and I hypothesize that this is the point at which it becomes very noticeable that you've got more gravity than normal, and it becomes draining. It's probably bad for your health because it makes your heart have to pump harder to get blood to your head. It's probably very tiring. For anyone to even be able to engage in 1.5 G for prolonged periods of time, they would probably have to do a lot of training. Of course, we don't know. People might be a lot more tolerant to high G than we think, because right now we only have 2 data points, being Earth and the International Space Station, which is 0. And of course, the people on the International Space Station are very healthy, so they are literally handling 0 gravity in the best possible way of all humans, because astronauts have to be very physically fit. And it causes a lot of problems, 0 gravity. So hypergravity would probably cause a lot of opposite problems, and that would be bad. It would probably give you back problems and all sorts of things. It would probably strain your heart. It would probably increase the risk of heart attack. It would also probably give you farsightedness, I believe, because people on the ISS get short-sightedness, and that is because without gravity, the blood that usually pools in their legs enters the upper half of their body more often, and so their heads are actually more swollen, and that pushes on their eyes, on the backs of their eyes, pushes them forward, and that results in short-sightedness. So on Jupiter or any other high-gravity object, if people could live there, you'd probably get the opposite, where it's draining to your legs, all your blood, and so that would put a strain backwards on your eyes, and that would result in farsightedness. So that's just interesting. But yeah, hypergravity, unpleasant. I wouldn't want to live there on any hypergravity world. So next we have Earth-like gravity, which is likely to be the range from 0.8 G to 1.2 G. And there are a lot of planets in this range. You've got Venus, Earth, of course, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. These gas giants are kind of surprising because they are much, much larger than Earth. But at the same time, they're much less dense. And so it actually balances out, interestingly. It's really just Jupiter that has crushing gravity. So yeah, but we know what this is, and Venus has about 90% Earth gravity. So people would be fine here. These are places where people would have no problems. So next we go to hypogravity, and this is between 0.1 G and 0.8 G. So this is a pretty broad range, and I think it's possible to subdivide it further into 0.1 G to 0.5 G and then 0.5 to 0.8. And so this is where gravity is still present and very much there. When you drop an object, it'll quickly fall, but on the moon or a place with 10% gravity, say that this water bottle takes 1 second to fall on Earth. On a planet with 10% gravity, it would take 3 seconds to fall, which is slow, but like it's still a reliable process that you can think about, the process of falling that would occur. And so these are places where you would have to worry about, your bone density slowly decreasing. Of course, we don't know the extent of that because, again, we only have 2 data points. We don't know what things would be like on Mars with 38% gravity or the moon with like 16% gravity. But a lot of worlds fall in this range, actually. All the Galileans, all of the, just Titan, Mars, Mercury, lots of planets fall into this hypogravity range. And so we'll have to figure out how to live with that. I ultimately would prefer it. I think it would be nice, relaxing. What do you think? Would you guys like to live on a hypogravity world?
Vacation there.
You'd vacation there?
I don't know if I'd live there.
Yeah, we'll get into some even lower gravities, but I think the ideal gravity is Martian gravity, and again, Martian fanboy, because I think if you go much lower than that, it becomes inconvenient, and that's like the next range we'll enter into. This hypogravity range is like, you can still live a normal life, except with some like changes. But those changes are like changes to just how normal things operate. Like you wouldn't really change your behavior that much. Maybe you'd create a few new sports, maybe a few processes would be different, but like it wouldn't change architecture, for instance, because stairs would still work. On worlds that have even lower gravity than this, you can't have stairs in the way that we do because stairs operate on gravity to make you fall down. You would need to have like Velcro shoes or something. But so that's why I like Martian gravity. That's my favorite. I think it would be very fun to have that, just relaxing. But
Nice.
yeah. So next we've got Decigravity. So this is 0.01 to 0.1 G. This is where gravity is still like a thing that happens. It's still because basically on a world with 1% the gravity of Earth, if this water bottle falls in 1 second, on that planet, it'll take 10 seconds to fall. A very, very slow, long time, but it'll still fall eventually. And so what that means is like you don't have to worry about the same things that you do when you're in free fall, because this is an interesting thing. There's this story about the like millions of dollars were poured into creating a ballpoint pen that would work in space. Like NASA spent a lot of money on this. And then the joke is when the Russians were faced with the same problem, they just used a pencil. And like it's a bit of a joke. But the joke oversimplifies the fact and glosses over the fact that anytime the Russians would sharpen their pencil, there would now be pencil shavings floating in the air that some unsuspecting cosmonaut might inhale and choke on and have a very bad time with. Also, any eraser shavings as well. But on a world where you've got between 1% and 10% gravity, the pencil shavings, the eraser shavings, dust will settle. It'll settle at a slower rate, but you don't really think about the rate at which dust settles. That's not really a day-to-day concern. So, and like with the foods they eat, the foods they eat on the ISS all have to be like packaged or non-crumbling, like because crumbs are death, because they will just permanently be in the air. You've got to you would need some sort of system to sweep them out. But on these worlds, you do at least get the fact that dust particles will settle, so you can have at least that, but you would need major changes to architecture and clothing. The floors would probably have to be covered in either like magnets, electromagnets, or like Velcro. I see the electromagnets as less likely because it's really expensive, but Velcro would also be really expensive because you have to just coat the entire floor in it. I don't know. Maybe it would be just specific areas. Like your whole house could be normal floors, but then the stairs are Velcro. And the reason you would want to do that is so that like after each step, you would physically have to like pull yourself down a step, which is just weird to think about because here on Earth, when you walk down the stairs, it just like you just fall really. The mechanism by which you go down the stairs is that you stop supporting yourself in your top leg, right? You fall about 1 foot, and then your bottom leg hits the next step, which is a very analytical and weird way to think about going down the stairs. But you would have to think about how to go down the stairs on another planet. Like, this is just a very big thing. Like, no one ever really like talks about this, like how you go down the stairs, because that's just weird. Like, it's not really a normal consideration. But on these worlds, there is not a force, or at least it's not a very strong force, that will actually help you go down. So you need to figure out a way, maybe a railing instead of Velcro even, to like, you'd have to pull yourself down the stairs. Just weird sort of things go on here. And then finally, we've got microgravity. And this is essentially free fall. This is, just think of like the ISS. Things will drift on worlds like this. Like on Mimas, you've got about 1/150th the gravity of Earth. So if I just like had this eraser in the air, like it'll drift, eventually it'll fall. But I think once you get below 1% Earth gravity, then you really begin to get problems with dust particles not settling and really having to change your way of life. Because if you just, if you spill a glass of water, you don't want it floating around. Like, that's just very strange. Very abnormal things would be occurring on these worlds. So, yeah, but that's it.
Nice.
So what's your guys' favorite? I know, Sebastian, you sort of said you like roughly Earth-like.
Well, yeah, because that's how my body works. That's how I'm built. I am, in this case, I am not built different.
Not built different, yeah. What about you, Jacob?
I like Earth gravity for now. It's familiar, but I think that in the future, especially if they create like drugs or surgeries or even like cybernetic enhancements that help cope with things like spine issues or any number of gravity-related issues, I think that hypogravity might be nice, because I'm just thinking it'd be familiar enough that I could acclimate to it. But the structures and acrobatics that one could build and do on those planets would be insane.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
you'd be less restricted. And
I agree.
What the final thing I'm going to say about decigravity and microgravity, I think in the future, I'm just imagining, this is probably won't be what happens, but I'm thinking about like all the walls being made out of like magnetic metals, and people just having like magnets on their palms that they can use to like fly through the air.
Yeah, like Spider-Man.
Just, or kind of like Magneto.
Ah, yeah, that's true.
Just like float towards your destination by reaching toward it.
Yeah,
which would be really like kind of creepy. But
yeah. Well, it's also similar to the ISS. They have handles on all the walls. But Sebastian, I do think you did mention at one point that you would like a world that's like a 75% gravity world,
yes,
right? Didn't you say that at one point?
Yes, that's
okay.
where I would like to spend.
Hypogravity, but I won't split hairs here.
So, I would like that for the majority of my life, sure. But if you're asking where do I eventually settle down, where I do that, something close to Earth gravity, so like my blood still flows
properly.
Yeah. On the 3/4 planet, that's where I'm able to do my Jedi flips, and that's where I'm able to like, lift stuff and stuff like that. That's what it's all about.
All right. So I would prefer just home base at 40% gravity. Well, it's 38%, so that's Mars. What would you say, Jacob, within the hypogravity range would be your favorite sort of?
I think it would have to be towards the higher end in order for it to not just seem laggy and weird.
Yes, laggy. It would feel laggy, wouldn't it?
It would. And eventually, of course, I'd get used to it. But I think towards the upper range of like 70 to 0.8. Okay. So that I still like fall at a reasonable rate, but I can also like feel like I'm Spider-Man.
Yep. Yeah, that's interesting. I think there's an aspect too for me is that I am very clumsy and I will often knock something off a table. I want to live on a world where it'll take like twice as long to fall so that maybe I can catch it. Also, if it does fall, it is less likely to break. So that's just me. But yeah, anyway, let's go on to the next sections. The next section we've got is travel times. And we'll go over this like, I don't know. So this is pretty technical. But the travel times between worlds, it really depends on the power source you have and how much energy you're willing to spend. So there are two major modes of travel. Let's go to intraplanetary travel. So this is travel within one planetary system. And there are two ways you can travel. There's flip and burn, and there's coasting. So flip and burn is the most efficient, or well, not efficient. It's the quickest way to travel because you accelerate half of the way there, and then you turn around and you decelerate the other half of the way there. And the reason you do that is that humans can only withstand a certain amount of acceleration. As I said, hypergravity is very unpleasant for people. It's not likely that they could tolerate it for very long. So you effectively have a maximum acceleration of like 10 meters a second for long term, maybe 12. I mean, it's experimental, but it can't be that much greater than 10 meters a second. And so this is just an interesting thing because like in a lot of space movies and shows, it's not even the fact that they have like hyperdrives that let them go faster than light. Like I'm fine with that. But what's always weird is that they'll jump up to like 5 times the speed of light with the snap of their fingers and just be like, fine. When in reality, that would like grind them to atoms. They would be reduced to atoms, just a smear on the wall, you know, like that's immense acceleration.
That's not even counting like air resistance.
Exactly. That is like ripped to shreds instantaneously because that is greater than 300 million meters per second, which is 30 million Gs, 30 million times Earth's gravity. To get up to the speed of light, like and not die, it would take about a year, an entire year. Accelerating at 10 meters per second, it would take you about 1 year to get up to the speed of light. So, with that out of the way, let's look at this flip and burn stuff. So Earth to Luna is 60 Earth radii, or 380 megameters for reference, and then Jupiter to Callisto is 295 Earth radii, or 1.88 gigameters for reference. And so this is just your little travel table. So if you have a flip and burn out here of like 1 meter per second for, say, the Jovian system, which I think is very much possible because that's like they're acclimated to a lower gravity out on the Jovian system. So it would be interesting if people flip and burn around this system and it's like a flight to Australia, you know, like so flying from Io to Callisto, depending on how far apart they are, it would be like flying around the world like today. It would be just as accessible. So again, as I said, it would be a very tight-knit community here in the Jovian system. Getting to the moon's even easier, and people in the Earth-Luna system are acclimated to higher levels of gravity, so they could do faster flip and burn. And then when it comes to materials can handle much greater gravities. So that's why we have the 100 meters per second in there. So if you need to resupply someone on, you know, the moon or in the Jovian system, you could get stuff there pretty quick if it's able to withstand the G. But also remember that flip and burn requires an incredible amount of energy. We could not do it with the conventional rockets we have today. With fusion rockets, it would be a bit more achievable, but still very energy intensive. The most likely possibility would be like external power sources, like solar sails. And then alternatively, there's coasting. And so this coasting is sort of unrealistic because this is still, we're thinking of straight line just because that makes the calculations easier. But coasting is more realistically about orbital mechanics. And so you got to sort of fly around the system, transfer orbits, all that sort of thing. The coasting is more akin to how we'll get to Mars in the first place. But yeah, these are just some different speeds. But yeah, so let's go to the inner system. So the inner system, to get around the inner system, we've just got these tables here. So say Earth to Mars at its closest, or just on average, say it's 1 AU away, and you're doing a 3 meters a second flip and burn that Martians could handle, that would be 5.17 days. That's about a week. So that's interesting. Imagine it would take a week to get to Mars under sort of optimal conditions here. Like, that's just sort of something to think about. That's sort of like, that would be like sort of early 1900s, like steamships crossing the Atlantic. And of course, the only ones I can think of are ones that sank, but hopefully these ones would have much better missions. But like, you know, the Titanic from England to New York, or the Lusitania from New York to England, that kind of travel time, it would take you about a week on a steamship like that to go across the Atlantic. And you'd have a similar situation in the inner system, although hopefully with many fewer German U-boats and icebergs. So yeah, that's sort of the kind of system you have around here. But then when you look at the coasting side of things, which is what the early travel is more likely to be, it takes a few months going at interplanetary velocities in a transfer orbit to get around. And so that is much more similar to like the Mayflower crossing the Atlantic, the old wooden sail ships. And it makes sense that the first colonists, right, the first people going to Mars will definitely be taking like about 9 months to get there, which is a very long amount of time. But as it gets developed, you know, as more and more people live there, as we develop the systems to travel quicker, we will likely be able to make it more like a 1 week journey. So much more like these early 1900s steamships. So next we got the outer system. And the outer system is much more sprawling. So to get around the outer system with a coasting velocity, you either have to go much faster with coasting, and so this is where coasting could actually be more like a straight line, but again, coasting tends to mean a transfer orbit. But the same kind of transfer orbit, like the minimum energy transfer orbit that gets you from Earth to Mars, takes 9 months, but the same sort of orbit to Jupiter, it takes like 5-ish years. To Neptune would probably take a very, very long time. So ideally, you would get up to some higher velocities while coasting, but of course, you could try to flip and burn it, and that would be harder. But so in the outer system, the original voyages will take many years. Probably like to get to Jupiter, it'll probably be like a 5-year mission at first. The further worlds out at first would also have to be like decades, like maybe a decade for Saturn, which is a very long time, like not pleasant. That there is no historical analog here that I can think of, you know, with colonization, because the colonization, you know, at the longest, it took many months to get across the ocean. This is like you're trying to circumnavigate the globe like Ferdinand Magellan or something. That was a multiple year trip, and he like died before he even got there. So again, hopefully these missions would have better fortunes. But it's funny, the only historical examples we can remember of certain things are tragedies. Like, can you remember a steamboat, like an Atlantic cruise liner that didn't sink?
I cannot.
I cannot. I mean, that's just funny. Like, I just find that comedic. That's like, I don't know, maybe a U.S. warship, if you can name a given U.S. warship then from that time.
The USS Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah, probably. I don't know.
Probably
that
exists.
Sounds like a likely name. Also,
honestly,
USS...
the first one that came to...
Yeah, go ahead.
The first one that came to mind was the USS Maine, and I was like, oh, wait, no, that one blew up.
Spanish-American War, yeah. I was about to say that, too. You could say USS any given state, but, of course,
yes, the USS Teddy Roosevelt does exist.
Oh, cool. Nice.
And it is still out there.
Very cool. Ooh, it's still out there. So it probably makes the trip quicker. But anyway, also something to notice here, we get up to light speed, and it takes light about 1.5 hours to go 10 astronomical units, which means that communication itself is slow in the outer system. So Earth to Jupiter, if you want to talk to a friend on Jupiter, you will have to send them a message, and then it'll take 40 minutes to get there. They'll write a reply. It'll take another 40 minutes to get back. and an hour and a half later, you've got your message from your friend on Jupiter. So it would be slow conversation. And if you're trying to talk to someone on Neptune, that's even worse. Many hours, just time delay. So you can't really have meaningful face-to-face communication like we're doing right now on Discord. You could only like record a video message, send it off, and then they'd record a video message and send it back. No live communication, which is pretty rough. But again, just think of the historical analogs with, early communication. You would have to write a letter and wait for it to get there. But it's interesting is that we are running into the physical limits of the universe, the speed of light. So there will be no incredible leap forward, like there was from just letters to instantaneous communication. Like we could talk to someone in Australia via Discord or in Europe, anywhere in the globe, and it would be pretty much instantaneous communication, which is pretty incredible. But there will never come a point at which you can do that between the Earth and any other planet, which is just unfortunate. Unless physics is wrong.
Not until... Not until either wormholes or quantum entanglement are like common technology, if that's even possible.
Yeah, if it's even possible. Yeah, like the quantum entanglement thing, like a lot of the common ways that they say how you could do instant communication with quantum entanglement isn't actually like possible, but maybe there's a way to do it that we haven't thought of yet. I'm hoping physics is wrong, crossing my fingers, even though I want to be a physics major, and that would be, disastrous to my career, physics being wrong, because then I would have to relearn everything. But I kind of hope it is wrong because for the sake of, interstellar empires, it makes it much more convenient if physics is wrong. But yeah, so there's that. So then we get to the Oort Cloud. Now we're getting into very outer system territories, and we'll talk more about the Oort Cloud next episode. But out here, this is distant and dim, and the sun is just another star in the sky, and it would take many years under most systems. Even flip and burn would take many months, and flip and burn is very powerful. But again, assuming you don't have that energy, the fastest speed in the universe, light, takes about a week to go 1,000 astronomical units, and then a month and a half to go 10,000 astronomical units. So this is just incredibly distant. So then let's go to interstellar travel. This is crazy, because Proxima Centauri, light, the fastest thing in the universe, would take 4.2 years to get to Alpha Centauri, which is just crazy. And again, hoping physics is wrong, but there is no historical analog to this. This is a crazy insurmountable barrier. When in history would it take 4.2 years to get a message to your, friend or loved one or acquaintance, and then 4.2 years to get it back? That is an 8-year gap in correspondence. How could anyone have a meaningful relationship like that? There are possibilities, though, that, and this is within physics, is that if there is radical life extension in the future, if people live for 1,000 years on average, then what's 4 years here and there, right? That's the only possible way that this isn't sort of devastating to a society, because basically no sort of empire has that sort of communication lag. That's, I guess, what I was trying to say with the historical analogs. How could you have a coherent state between two star systems if it takes 4 years to even communicate with them? Imagine this. Imagine that the solar system is Britain and Proxima Centauri is America, right? And so in the equivalent of 1776, right, they declare independence, right? And they send out their message, we are now independent. It would take until 1780 before Britain, Britain, our home, the solar system, receives that message. So then it would take until 1784 for them to respond oh, there's no way we're going to let you do that. And it would take a minimum of 6 years, so until 1786, for them to get troops back to America. And that's a minimum. It would likely take longer because it would take immense amounts of energy to accelerate up to very near to light speed and then accelerate down again. And then say those troops needed reinforcements in 1786, right? They would send the message back, hey, we need reinforcements. That message would take until 1790 to get there, and then it would take at least until 1796 to get back. And now we're running into like the John Adams administration here. So these travel times are so slow and laggy. How would you have a coherent like interstellar empire? That's such a challenge. We'll talk about that to a greater extent in future episodes, but that is just a fundamental problem with the possibility of creating an interstellar empire. And again, the only way that this could sort of be circumvented is if people are living so long that they don't consider 4 years to be a long time, which is just interesting to think about, because there's this like thing where people say like, oh, life goes faster when you get older, and your parents are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that was like 12 years ago, that felt like yesterday. And you're like, yeah. But it is something to think about, and it's just simple mathematics when you get down to it, because for us, 12 years ago means 75% of our lives ago, but for our parents, 12 years ago means maybe 25% of their lives ago, or like even down to like 20% of their lives ago, you know? So it's just a different frame of reference. And if you are a being that has lived for, 10,000 years, right, then 12 years is just a little bit over 1% of your life ago. So you might be willing to wait 12 years to get a message back from someone. So that is sort of a consideration to make. And then, of course, we have intergalactic travel, which just takes a very, very, very long time. Millions and millions of years. And this is just, again, even more unsurmountable than the interstellar travel, which was already very insurmountable. And the only possible way that you maintain a coherent intergalactic empire is if people are literally living for like billions of years, which would be very crazy technology that you would need to develop to do that. And so it's just interesting to think about. Also, it could be too, if you have like a species of AI, maybe they have a different rate of time, because maybe they figure, oh, we can run much more efficiently if we run at a rate of like 1 to 1,000 with reality. So 1,000 years will pass, but the AI only experiences 1 year because it's doing calculations much more slowly. And so if you have an AI that is like slowed down by a factor of 1 trillion for the sake of efficiency, then maybe they could hold together an intergalactic empire. But again, just look at these travel times. These travel times for intergalactic travel to Andromeda, say, if you want to travel to Andromeda, that would take at least 2.5 million years, possibly longer. We're getting into the range of geological eras here, which is just crazy. That is just crazy to think about. 2.5 million years ago, humans did not exist. It was just like different species of man. So it's just like apes. Like, it's just kind of, it's crazy to think about. And like what might happen in the next 2.5 million years too. Like if you send a like group of colonists to the Andromeda galaxy, and it'll take them 2.5 million years to get there. By the time they get there, they will likely have like evolved into an entirely new species. And you probably weren't even considering talking to them anyway, because 2.5 million year communication lag, there's not going to be any meaningful communication. It's
hey,
like,
how are you?
2.5 million years later, they're like, what is this ancient script? This is unintelligible. I have no idea what this means. And then they send back like, what does this mean? And then it gets back, and it's 5 million years have passed, and it's like
their race has just been wiped out at this point.
Yeah, exactly. They're just like, leaves them on not read.
Oh my god.
But yeah, so that's it. So we'll talk about this sort of weird like distance thing in future episodes. So far, we've just been talking about the solar system, and the solar system may seem like vast, and it really is. But once you get to the vast, vast realm of the galaxy and of the observable universe, the solar system actually seems like a much more tightly knit community, which is nice to think about.
Nice.
And so on that note, final thoughts. So I hope you all enjoyed this foray into timekeeping and, interstellar, timetables and all that sort of thing. But yeah, that was a fun episode.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
So yeah, what do you guys think?
I'm looking forward to traveling to other worlds, to getting acquainted with stuff, to doing some flipping burn, to going all around the place, going to Mimas.
European water.
Hell yeah. I think I might throw my ring in the hat for Lunar Reenactment Day, for, I guess, Armstrong Day.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm looking forward to being the #1 ranked glaciator.
The glaciator.
The glaciator. So
yeah,
I'll leave you with
It'll be fun. There's such a variety of worlds to visit in this solar system, and I think it would be very nice to visit all of them, to do a sort of solar system tour. It would be very cool. But anyway, with
Jacob,
that being said,
what are you thinking?
Yeah.
It's kind of on a mind-boggling scale, especially as we got towards the end of travel.
Yeah.
I do think that we will live to see civilizations on Venus and Mars and Luna, and possibly even the Jovian, like within our solar system, Jovian System, maybe Saturn. I don't know. It almost seems like on mythological proportions in a way, like this idea of a solar system wide civilization.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that the whole idea was very interesting. Is really interesting to think about, like how to take entirely separate and not matching both like human biology and the actual like way that time functions on other planets, and try and like fit a square peg into a round hole in a way.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, it's just so interesting. Yeah, but thank you for coming on this show for this episode.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for
having me on.
Yeah, this was a really long episode. I didn't think it would go this long, but we had some great discussions, and so I'm glad you were our guest today, so thank you for coming. And I would like to thank Sebastian for being my co-host, as always.
As always.